The following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Call to order the Cary Town Council meeting of April 24th, and at this time I'll recognize our Mayor Pro Tem for the ceremonial opening.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're at item 1.3, adoption of our agenda. We have several changes to our agenda this evening. Number one, the town manager requests that we remove item 6.1, which was designation of a permanent name for Bartley Park from this agenda. Number two, staff requests that we remove item 6.7, Google Fiber Hut license agreement and license fee from the agenda since we have not yet received the appropriate documents to move forward. Staff will bring this back to us at a future date. Number three, staff requests that we remove item 4.3, owner-initiated annexation petition 14A04 for the Hodge, Hurl et al. Properties. Staff will bring this item to us at a future date. Number four, Councilmember Bush and Councilmember Smith would like to add under discussion an item to review the town's buffer protection program and policy. Is there a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That takes us to item 2.1. Mr. Smith will recognize our visiting culinary students from France.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my pleasure to invite Jeff Hadley and the entire La Touquet Culinary Student Delegation and any Sister Cities Association members present to meet me here at the podium. Thank you. All right. It's like campaigning, isn't it? Cary is very fortunate to have a very active Sister Cities program, and our visitors are working in 4 different area establishments as arranged by Wake Tech's Culinary Arts Department Chair, Mr. Jeff Hadley. Jeff has been working for many years with the Hotel and Culinary Arts College in La Takay, bringing students over nearly every year since our first exchange back in 1993. The students are working in food preparation and service at the Umstead Hotel, the Washington Duke Inn, the Renaissance Raleigh, and Prestonwood Country Club. The students have been placed with Tom and Teresa Arnhart, Cary residents. Some students are at the who are working at the Umstead are hosted by Ralph and Karen Gray and Ken and Karen George, and the others are being housed at the respective hotels. The students are joined by their chaperones Annie Chattel and Cedric Lavial. I also want to acknowledge the Sister Cities Association of Cary. They have worked very hard to make this a successful exchange, and I want to thank them for all their work. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Hadley to say a few words. Jeff, it's all yours.
Oh, great. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you. 22 years. It's a long time to be doing this. I haven't done it all 22 years. I've been a host a lot of that time, but this year is a little special to me because we actually have 3 home hosts, and if it wasn't for them, this wouldn't have happened this year. We really have some great people, and I want to thank Teresa and Tom, Ken and Karen, Ralph and Karen for taking this on with us. This is really nice. And the students are having a good time? Yes. Okay, great. We're not going to introduce everybody, but we have one of the students would like to say a few words to you in English. Maxime?
First of all, I wanted to thank you, Mr. the Mayor, Mr. Wainbrecht, and the members of the council for giving us a few time to just talk about that. Thank you. North Carolina is really a beautiful region. I'm really happy to be here to live in this experience. And this experience would be just impossible without the help of the Wake Technical College of the Wake, sorry. The Wake Technical Community College, and especially Jeff Hadley, who manages to find the families who welcomed us among them. And the hotels, he also found the hotels who accepted to give us work. Yes, so I just wanted to thank everyone here to make not only this experience possible, but a great experience, and I hope we will never forget it. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Annie, did you want to say something? He did very okay. Well, let's give him one more round of applause, and thank you very much. Thank you for all coming.
We're so glad that you're all here. I have a long relationship with Madame Chattel and other students that have visited in the past, and it's fun to watch them experience our land and our culture. I know that you guys are very interested in the gray squirrels, right? Those are things you haven't seen in France, but there are other things that you see, and I know you're going to New York later. Have a great time with your visit here. Have a great time in New York, and we look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you.
Au revoir.
Think about it, Mr. Mayor. None of these kids were born the first time we had the group over.
Yeah.
Okay, we're now at item 2.1, presentation of the State's Treasurer's Award for Excellence in Accounting and Financial Management for Aquastar. Ms. Karen Mills of our staff will introduce this item. Ms. Mills.
Good evening, Council. I am very happy to be here tonight. I want to introduce 2 of our very important peers in local government. I have with me tonight Sharon Edmondson, who is the Director of the Fiscal Management Section of the State and Local Government Finance Division of the State Treasurer's Office, who we affectionately call the LGC. And also with her is Greg Allison. He is a senior lecturer in public finance and government at the UNC School of Government, and he is here tonight as well to present the award to the town of Cary. I want to point out that Greg is also a Cary citizen and a treasure to us. Both of them are leaders in our field in government finance, and we're very fortunate to have them among us and nearby to provide leadership for us and education for our staff. So I'll introduce the two of them at this time.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. As Karen said, I am on the faculty at the UNC School of Government. I'm a 17-year resident here of the town of Cary. But tonight I'm representing the North Carolina Association of Certified Public Accountants, which I have been a member of now for over 30 years. For almost 25 years, the Department of State Treasurer has partnered with the North Carolina Association of Certified Public Accountants in identifying excellence in accounting, financial reporting, cost management, budgeting, you name it, for local governments all across the state. And what we have discovered many, many years ago is that by recognizing these types of achievements in local governmental entities, it gives incentives to other governments to follow suit, to improve their activities, their fiscal management, and to strive to always do better. So, like I said, for over 25 years, the organization, in partnership with the State Treasurer's Office, has recognized excellence in a variety of categories. Just very, very quickly on how this process plays out. Each year, the application period, if you will, opens up, and completed entries from governments across the state submit their applications to the North Carolina Association of CPAs, where they are evaluated specifically by members of the Governmental Accounting and Auditing Committee, of which I am a member. As I mentioned earlier, entries can range anywhere from evidence of accounting and financial management practices that have been significantly improved by programs, systems, methods, and other procedures that may result in either types of fiscal savings, service efficiencies, and the like. And it is our goal that the winners of these types of awards can actually share their expertise with governments of similar size and encourage them to do similar type practices. It's always a competitive process. The goal of the program, as I said earlier, was to encourage governments to strive to improve, and that goal has been reached time and again over the last 25 years. And what we do is, in several different categories, once these awards are identified, there are presentations made to the councils or county commissioners of winning governments across the state, and the practice is, the method of practice is communicated in that manner. So we are obviously tonight more than pleased to award the town of Cary. That was chosen by the committee to receive an award in the category of municipalities with a population in excess of 25,000. And I am more than happy to turn it over now to my colleague Sharon Edmondson on the committee, who's going to describe the specific award in more detail and the commitment of the State Treasurer's Office. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you for having us at the meeting tonight, and it's my pleasure to be here to present this award to Karen. This award was developed many years ago by State Treasurer Harlan Bowles, who thought it was a great idea to not only recognize local governments for their innovative accounting practices, but also to give them a venue to share what they were doing with other local governments across the state, so that we could all learn from people creating innovative projects like the one that Karen and her staff have done. Cary was selected to receive this award for the Aquastar project. Karen led her team in implementing the project, which, as you know, involves advanced meter reading by radio. That replaced the once-a-month manual read with the hourly, I believe, read via radio signal for folks' water usage. And this allows customers, of course, to monitor their usage if they choose to do so via the internet. It also allows the town to spot anomalies in usage as well. I think an unintended benefit from this program, as Karen shared with me, is it also allows parents when they're away from home to log on and see who's using how much water while they're gone. So you can kind of tell when your teenagers come home. So unfortunately, I don't live in Cary, so I won't be able to take advantage of that. We congratulate Karen, though, and her staff for a job very well done. We all know Karen's not one to rest on her laurels, and I can't wait to see what her next project is. And look forward to learning from that, and I know the citizens of Cary and the rest of the state also look forward to that as well. So it's with great pleasure that I present this award to Karen for the 2014 State Treasurer's Award.
Thank you. I would say thank you to our council for the vision and the fortitude for supporting what could have been a controversial project and sometimes remains challenging. But what we've done is save our utility over $10 million and through technology and improved efficiency. But it's really been transformational in customer service. And I think that's one of the things that we didn't count on to be as tremendous as it has. And it's really doing great things for our customers so that we can be proactive with them, present them data on the web to enable them. I really need to stop and say thank you to Scott Berry, who is here and who did such a tremendous job on implementing this project that he earned himself a promotion right on out as Director of Permits and Inspections, and I'm still suffer the losses of that, but I'm so happy for him and for the organization. I also want to say that this project required almost every department in the town of Cary to implement, and again, I thank council for their support, but I specifically need to thank the Public Information Office, the Technology Services Department, our Public Works Department, our Town Attorney's Office, our Mayor, our Manager's Office. Human Resources helped us manage our staff through this transition. So it's very important to us. It's making a great difference, and we appreciate the recognition. So thank you again for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. It's a great success story. We, like you said, save the town tons of money, improve customer service, and find a lot of leaks. So we're being very environmentally friendly. We're not wasting water. And we do really appreciate our guests being here tonight, taking time out of your day to recognize this program and our staff for what I think is an exemplary project and thing for the town. So thank you both for being here. Thank you, Ms. Mills. We have now reached agenda item 3, which is Public Speaks Out. We've included instructions for speaking at this forum on the printed agenda. If you'd like to speak, please take a seat in the rows to my right that are shown as reserved and follow the instructions on the printed agenda. Public Speaks Out speakers have up to 3 minutes each for their comments, and speakers may speak on any topic as long as it's not a public hearing. There's a 3-minute time limit, as I said, and I'll have to be strictly enforcing that time limit to be fair to all of our speakers. There's a timer that's located on the podium, and when the green light turns yellow, that means you have 30 seconds left. And when the yellow light turns red, that means your time is up. And at that time, I'll have to interrupt you. And I ask all of our speakers in advance to please adhere to our guidelines. And if you're representing a group, that you have one group speak for the entire group. One person speak for the entire group. So now's the time for Public Speaks Out. And I'll invite the first speaker to the podium at this time. Anyone for Public Speaks Out? You might want to adjust that microphone on your way.
My apologies.
For a short guy. Good evening. I'm Alan Reberg. I've resided in the Farmington Woods neighborhood for the past 24 years. Tonight, I want to speak to the 2015 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. I was told that the comment period closed yesterday, but I wanted to comment anyway, even though it won't be included in what's submitted to HUD. I speak as one who is deeply concerned about the shortage of affordable housing. From that perspective, the proposed $504,000 of community development block grant money the proposed uses seem just fine to me. I applaud this and the support of Habitat for Humanity, the housing rehab program, and helping seniors with emergency home repairs. That's all great. But those good things don't do nearly enough. Wake County is now short over 50,000 affordable housing units. The county and all the municipalities, Cary included, really need to do much more to stimulate, not just accept applications, but stimulate affordable and workforce housing development, especially housing for our neighbors who live at 40% of the area median income. The private sector just cannot meet the needs of these low-income residents. You know what? It would be really great if Cary could actually be a leader among municipalities in affordable housing development. So many of us have been given so much. Finally, I want you to know that the public input and comment process for this has been very confusing. You held a public hearing a month ago on March 27. The record states, "This public hearing is part of the town's citizens' participation efforts to receive citizen feedback on the 2015 CDBG Annual Action Plan." Excuse me. But that draft plan was not available before the hearing. So people like me were not able to offer informed comment. Yes, subsequent written comment was possible, but informed comment to you, the council, during that hearing was impossible. The March 27 minutes show that the only input was from two organizations who were asking for support. I will be sending a letter to Planning Director Olma with details of my efforts to receive these draft plans. Finally, thank you so much for your service to us residents of Cary, and please stimulate more development of affordable and workforce housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker for Public Speaks Out.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Brad Reedstrom, and my wife and I own 805 Bell Arbor Court in the Reserve Subdivision, which is adjacent to the Stitt property, which is the subject of the rezoning request 13-REZ-25. I've been asked to speak out on behalf of several of my neighbors and homeowners who are unable to attend this meeting. We are collectively asking you to vote against this rezoning request for two reasons. First, the proposed conditions do not provide for the type of transition area that is keyed in the Southwest Area Plan and will result in a significant adverse impact on the property in the vicinity of the subject tract. In the entire project, there are only 11 lots that are proposed to meet the LDR minimum requirement of 10,000 square feet. Every single other lot will be an MDR lot. This condition does not provide for an adequate transition between the reserve's LDR and MDR as indicated on the plan. Now, we know that we've asked the developer to do a difficult thing because we've asked the developer to compromise. But we haven't asked the developer to do anything that we haven't been willing to do ourselves. And we have suggested solutions and proposed solutions that would put lots behind us that are significantly less than the average of what we have collectively among us. And the developer hasn't been interested in making any type of effort or concession to meet the concerns that we have over the lack of transition between those two properties. You know, originally we were hoping to get some development in that area that was similar to what had been done on that property adjacent to the east, and we've been willing to back away from it without any sort of compromise being provided by the developer. The second reason to vote against the rezoning request is because the proposed conditions will result in a density of development that outstrips the ability of the town and other service providers to maintain sufficient levels of service to existing development not to mention being able to provide sufficient public safety and educational facilities to the subject property. We are living every day already with the effects of failing intersections in schools that are enrolled beyond their capacity. Until conditions are proposed which would reduce the density of the development, we do not see it as either safe or wise to unnecessarily overburden the existing failing infrastructure. We believe this is a time when it would be prudent to modify the density of the development to avoid making a failing system worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker for Public Speaks Out.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Scott Hoyt, and I would like to start off my time by reading a quote from John Ruskin. When we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight, nor for present use alone. Let it be such work as our descendants will thank us for, and let us think as we lay stone on stone that a time is to come when those stones will be held sacred because our hands have touched them, and that man will say as they look upon the labor and the wrought substance of them, see this our fathers did for us. I wanted to share that quote as I know you have a busy evening in front of you and some pretty big decisions to make this evening as it pertains to the town of Cary. I would like to now present a petition signed by over 236 West Cary residents in the last 48 hours, asking you simply to acknowledge the chronic overcrowding of the schools in West Cary. Olson Ridge Elementary School is at 110%. That's up 10% from when I was here last time a month ago. Highcroft Drive Elementary School is 114% of intended capacity. Mills Park Elementary is at 107 of intended capacity, and Mills Park Middle is at 113. According to U.S. Census data, every home in the 27519 zip code generates 0.36 public elementary school students and 0.35 public middle and high school students. In essence, every 75 new homes requires a new classroom, another teacher, and strains extracurricular activities, gyms, and counseling centers. We all know there are thousands of new homes, townhomes, and apartments either finished recently, under construction, or otherwise in the process in West Cary. This may not be reason alone to reject a project, but is certainly reason to really take a look at the quality, neighborhood impact, traffic level of service grades in the area, and compatibility. Section 3.4.1 of the LDO clearly states the qualifications for rezoning, and Section 2 states the town and other service providers must be able to provide sufficient public safety, education, recreational, transportation, and utility facilities and services to the subject property while maintaining sufficient levels of service to existing development. Our petition simply asks you to acknowledge school overcrowding situation and keep it in mind when deliberating new developments. Please take a strong look at all projects and make sure they exceed the LDO and the requirements for developing West Cary, not simply working towards the lowest common denominator. Is it possible to find the best projects for the area, ones that will maximize area appeal and minimize area impact? We hope so. Please help us build the Cary we all want, one that we will be proud to tell our children we were part of building. Please start saying no, or at the very least, not right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Next speaker for Public Speaks Out.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. I am here as a concerned resident of West Cary, living in the Highcroft neighborhood.
Could you give us your name, please?
My name is Terry Nelson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I am for growth in this area. I am for smart growth. And currently, what is happening in this area isn't smart growth, in my opinion. In an area where traffic has steadily gotten worse to the point of being a safety issue, why has development continued to be approved in this area? It doesn't make sense to me. We wouldn't approve development if we knew things such as power and water could not be provided, yet we are still provide opening for development in areas where safety is an issue. Currently, in this area, there is a traffic study that was done in relation to the Stitt property. Many of these intersections nearby fail. Even after improvement, many of these continue to fail. One intersection near the Bachelor property, which has been approved, there are 800 daily trips. This has not been included in the traffic study for the Stitt property. I would ask you, as you consider approving this development, that you take into consideration the traffic concerns and the intersections that are currently failing and will continue to fail after this development. The main intersection, main access to the Stitt property subdevelopment will fail even after all the improvements are made. Currently, the Mills Park Fire Station uses Green Hope School Road as one of their main access roads. With all the traffic on this road, I see that as a potential issue for those needing the fire station requirements. Also, tonight, on my way to here, I noticed a very large group of cyclists as they were coming on High House Road heading towards Highway 55. A large group of them, which really exemplifies the fit community that Cary is known for. Behind them, about 5 feet, were a pile of cars waiting to get around them. To me, this was a safety issue just waiting to happen, an accident waiting to happen. Cary is known and is highly desirable to young families and people who are very fit, and we would like to keep it that way, especially in West Cary near the neighborhood of Highcroft. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker for Public Speaks Out. Anyone else for Public Speaks Out? We'll close Public Speaks Out and we'll move to our next agenda item. I lost my place. Consent agenda. We're now on the consent agenda portion of tonight's meeting. That's item 4. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV, we're going to take a few moments to review our agenda items. Keep in mind that one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda are minutes, owner-initiated annexation petitions for Angelina Fumagalli properties for the State Employees Credit Union, accessible pedestrian signals for the Walnut Street Pedestrian and Traffic Improvement Project, recreation fund payments policy replacement, request to rename the street Coffin Bay Court to Rocky Bay Court, ratification of resolutions for Center Green Park at Weston and Busy Bee Preschool. Ms. Bush asked that we pulled item 4.5, Walnut Street pedestrian and traffic improvements, accessible pedestrian signals from the consent agenda. We'll discuss this issue when we get to agenda item 6, which is our discussion items. Would council members like to pull any other items from the consent agenda for discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're now at public hearings. Same rules apply for public hearings that applied for Public Speaks Out, except for one thing. You now have 5 minutes instead of 3 to make your comments. Our first public hearing is owner-initiated annexation petition 14A01 for the Herbert Bailey property. Mr. Nicholas of our staff will present this item, then we're going to open the public hearing. Council may take action this evening. Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a request for annexation of 7.14 acres of property located on Bailey Park Lane and Evans Road. Property is approximately 900 feet southeast of the Evans Road, West Dynasty Drive, and Rochelle Road intersection. Request also includes 0.66 acres of adjacent right-of-way. Property is in Cary's ETJ, and it's currently zoned residential 8 conditional use. The request is associated with the subdivision plan for proposed development of 20 lots.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nicholas. At this time, I'll open the public hearing and invite the first speaker to approach the podium. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Council members have any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve annexation 14-A01.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
and a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We move to items 5.2 and 5.3, public hearing on the annexation and rezoning request for Cary Oaks subdivision. We will hear reports from our staff. We're going to allow the applicant to explain the request, and we're going to conduct a public hearing for both requests. Council will not act on these items this evening. We'll refer them to our Planning and Zoning Board. We'll refer the rezoning to our Planning and Zoning Board, and staff will bring back the annexation to us at a future agenda. Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you. This is an owner-initiated request for annexation of approximately 12 acres of property located on Cary Oaks Drive and Holly Stream Court. Subject property is located outside the town of Cary extraterritorial jurisdiction and presently has Wake County zoning. Therefore, there's also a rezoning application to apply initial town of Cary zoning in association with the annexation. Subject property is located off Holly Springs Road, approximately 3,000 feet southwest of the intersection with 1010 Road, and it's within the Cary Oaks subdivision. As you can see in this aerial view, this is a developed subdivision, and all the residential lots within the development currently contain dwellings. The lots were approved under Wake County regulations as a cluster subdivision. There's open space to the north of the lots on Cary Oak Drive, and a small area of open space to the south of the lots on Holly Stream Court. This slide shows the overall boundary of the Cary Oak subdivision. It's outlined here in red. Purple shading represents the properties that are the subject of the request. Request includes 23 of 26 residential lots within the development and 5 parcels that are designated as open space. All of the residential lots within the existing development currently receive town of Cary sewer service, and water service is provided by a private system. This slide shows that the property is adjacent to the town's existing corporate limits, which is shaded here in yellow. Since it is adjacent to the corporate limits, all the lots within the subdivision are not required to be annexed. As noted earlier, the lots are outside of town of Cary's ETJ, and they presently have a Wake County zoning designation of residential 30. Cary's land use plan designates the residential lots in this development as medium density residential, which is a range of 3 to 8 dwelling units per acre. The open space parcels are designated as parks and open space. As part of the annexation, the parcels must be rezoned to Cary zoning designation. Based on the size of the existing lots, a zoning designation of residential 8 is being proposed for the lots that contain the dwellings. The open space parcels would be designated as resource recreation. According to Cary's GIS maps, a portion of the development is impacted by a stream buffer. Cary's Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Facilities Master Plan shows a proposed greenway within the open space along the eastern portion of the subdivision. Since the property has already been subdivided and built, there would not be a greenway dedication as part of this rezoning. Subdivision is located off Holly Springs Road, which is designated on Cary's Comprehensive Transportation Plan as a major thoroughfare. Since the subdivision has already been constructed, there would be no additional right-of-way dedication or road widening associated with this rezoning. Notice of the proposed rezoning was sent to property owners within 400 feet of the subject property. Notice of the hearing was also posted on the property and published in accordance with the applicable statutes. Since this rezoning is associated with an owner-initiated annexation, protest petitions are not applicable to this request. Staff did receive one inquiry regarding the proposed rezoning, which was just a general question about the annexation requirements and the overall process. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. At this time, I'll invite the applicant forward.
Not sure if the applicant's here tonight. They may not be here.
Somebody running out.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
All right.
My name is Timothy Grissinger, and I'm the president of the subdivision that's getting the request for the rezoning and annexation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you have anything you want to present, now's the time.
No, I think we're, this was a group neighborhood want, so I think we're pretty much know everything and just waiting for y'all's decision. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. This time we'll open up the public hearing and invite the first speaker to approach the podium. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Open it up to council members for questions or comments.
A quick question. Could you explain some of the strange shapes that we see here? There's a circle in the middle, and that's not part of the annexation, and then a triangle off to the left?
The triangle is part of the open space. I'm not sure what the reason, it was shown that way on the subdivision plat. I'm not sure what the reason, but it is part of the open space configuration. The circle is actually part of the open space as well, but it's a well site. There's a private well that serves these, the subdivision, and that's the well site for that.
And that land is not part of the annexation request?
It's not, no.
And then the streets, are they to Cary standards? Are they private streets, or are they to Town of Cary standards?
They're built under Wake County's regulations. I'm not sure of the status of those as town streets or not.
So I'm curious, if this land is annexed, does the Town of Cary take over maintenance of these streets, or are they private streets?
It would be Town of Cary, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But we have 3 homes in this neighborhood that are not requesting annexation?
Correct.
Is that well site going to continue to provide water to those 3 homes?
It'll continue to provide them to all the lots. And
So will the town be extending water and
that would be up to the
services?
residents of the subdivision. It would be up to them to petition. Once they're annexed, they'd be eligible to petition the town. But right now, they just receive town sewer service.
Okay.
The water is a private water system. And it's
The
proposed to
overriding
stay that
reason
way.
for annexation is, or the rezoning?
I'm sorry?
The overriding reason for the rezoning and annexation?
I believe right now they pay a higher rate for sewer because they're not part of the town. So by being annexed into the town, they'd pay a low rate in sewer, but also receive other services, trash pickup and other services that they don't currently have.
Other questions? Comments? Okay. As I said earlier, the annexation will come back to us at another time. The rezoning will go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their consideration and recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. We now move to item 5.4. It's the Young Property rezoning request. We're going to hear a staff report. The applicant may explain the requests, and we'll conduct a public hearing. Council will not take action on this item tonight. Instead, we're going to refer it to the Planning and Zoning Board. Ms. Grannon of our staff will introduce the item. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. For your consideration is a request to rezone approximately 35.37 acres located at 1340 and 1346 Old Apex Road. Subject property is highlighted here in yellow, located to the west of Old Apex Road. And here's a close-up view of the property showing that it at one time was developed with a swim club that you may recall and a detached residential home. Cary's land use plan designation for the property is low-density residential. The existing zoning is residential 40 and residential 20 for a small 3/4 of an acre parcel where the residential dwelling is currently located. The applicant has proposed transitional residential conditional use. Conditions proposed by the applicant would limit the use to detached residential, would set a maximum of 50 lots, a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet, a minimum side setback of 5 feet, and require a type A opaque buffer adjacent to existing residential lots on Solstice Circle, located to the south. So this is Solstice Circle and the adjacent neighborhood. The ordinance requires a 20-foot type B semi-opaque buffer. The applicant has proposed a 30-foot type A buffer. Property owners within 400 feet of the subject property were notified. The property was posted. There was one protest petition received, which was greater than 100 feet from the property. It was therefore not valid. There were no issues cited on the protest petition. Staff did receive one phone call from an adjacent property owner asking what the feasibility was of the property being preserved as permanent open space, and 2 calls from citizens voicing support for the request. The site is impacted, according to Cary's GIS maps, by a stream buffer, and field determination of such features will be required at the time of site plan review. This green line shows the location of the closest greenway trail to the subject property, according to Cary's Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan. Old Apex Road is a thoroughfare and therefore a 50-foot streetscape would be required along the subject property when it is developed. And the green line shows the closest C-Tran fixed route along Old Apex Road. At this time, I'd like to ask the applicant to come forward and present their request, and following the public hearing, staff is available for your questions.
Good evening. I'm Sandy Drews. My sisters and I own this piece of property. We love this piece of property. It is beautiful. It's been in our family for years and years. We really don't want to sell it, but it's just not financially feasible for us to keep it. So if it's going to have to be developed for something, we really want it to be something that is going to be of value for the community. When my father passed away, we got a lot of phone calls and offers and proposals for people who wanted to do all sorts of things with this property, business, apartments, high-density housing. We don't want that. We assume that our neighbors would not want that. And we know for certain our parents would not have wanted that. And so we have looked at, I think, 17 or 18 serious proposals. We are currently talking to Pulte Homes. We like what they are proposing because they are proposing low density. They are offering to keep more green space than anyone else is offering. They are willing to keep the pond. Almost everyone else wanted to fill in the pond so that they could cram more units in there, which we would not want to happen. They have worked extensively with the neighbors, holding meetings with them, and have been very responsive to the neighbors' concerns and requests, answering their questions and concerns. We feel that of all the options that we have, this would be the best option for the community, and that's really important to us. This piece of property, I think, is not currently incorporated into the town of Cary yet, but we are requesting that you consider this zoning for us because it is, I think it does fall within your jurisdiction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This time, I'll open up the public hearing and invite the first speaker to approach the podium.
Good evening. My name is Bob Anderson with Pulte Group, and I just wanted to go over a couple issues that came up with the neighborhood meetings, just to bring you guys up to speed on that. We proposed a site plan at the neighborhood meeting so we could better discuss the layout, access points, buffers, also showing how we're going to protect the pond with this development. A couple issues came up. The first one was traffic along Old Apex Road. We hired a VHB who also did the traffic study for the apartment complex down the street to look to see how our development would affect the level of service. Based on the low density, 50 units or less, they established, they came to the second neighborhood meeting and made a presentation and said that this project, obviously with a low amount of lots, is not going to adversely affect the level of service on Old Apex Road. The second issue that came up was the connection to West Chatham Street and whether that was going to happen with this project. We showed it on our first site plan. We got a lot of resistance from that, especially from the neighbors from Solstice Court, because they did not want to have that road behind them as a through street. So we had a couple of meetings with staff. We told the neighbors that this would be site plan determined, but we would propose to submit a cul-de-sac to make sure that that is not a cut-through street. And as long as we could get staff's approval on this, this is how we would proceed with the project, which would also, they were concerned about their kids and going back there and people going from Old Apex to West Chatham and not using traffic light. The third issue was creating that buffer in between the road and Old Apex and Solstice Court. We had miscommunication on our end for the 20 feet, so we need to request that we make that a 30-foot buffer with a Type A opaque. And like we said, we're just excited to have this property. We understand the value of it, the history of it, and the natural amenities of it, and look forward to protecting that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker for this public hearing.
Hi, my name is Hong, and thanks for holding this meeting for our community. And basically, I'm speaking for myself, for my family, as well as for the neighborhood. probably, I mean, a lot of material, after I hear the gentleman over there speaking over here, I got relieved a little bit because the major point shortly covered. I stand over here because of the concern regarding the kids' safety related to this community development. I'm the resident of South State Circle for over 10 years. So I know this community pretty well. Basically, specifically for the neighborhood close to the community that's going to build, it tends to be the neighborhood with the young kids, with the little kids. So most of these kids are in the age of a preschool or elementary. So in the original proposal, the road, there's going to be a road in back of our community that's very close to our house. We're told that the buffer area originally is only 20 feet. South State Circle is built on a very small lot, so only 0.12 acre. So if only 20 feet to the road, which is going to be traffic uploaded from the main street, that's going to be a main concern for the kids in the neighborhood. Basically, 20 feet, you can imagine how close it's going to be. So practically, drivers from the road can see through our house very closely. So that's raised an alarming concern for myself. I have 2 kids. One is 3 and one is 6. And based on my understanding, our neighborhood has similar concern as well. So, at this moment, I kind of relaxed a little bit because the gentleman before me presented this main point very well. So we hope that with the council members who are supposed to give the consent to this project or this rezoning proposal can have a careful concern about site planning. Thank you very much. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Next speaker for this public hearing. Anyone else for this public hearing? We're going to close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comments. Seeing none.
Just would like to make a few comments. I appreciate Pulte's willingness to work with the neighborhood to address some of the concerns. And I really appreciate the family really and truly trying to, honor the wishes of their parents and create a project that, in my opinion, would, hopefully be a benefit to the community. You've got apartments in high density across the street. You've got commercial on the corners. Low-density single-family homes, I think, would help that area have a good mix. It's also kind of one of our gateways into downtown, and I think some new single-family residential construction right there might help in that regard. But and then keeping the pond, I mean, that is awesome. I think it's be a great amenity for the community. So.
Okay. Other comments? Ms. Eckhoff?
Just had a question for Ms. Grannon or the applicant, whomever. So if the minimum lot size is proposed to be 7,000, what will the largest lot size be?
There's no zoning condition, or there's nothing in the ordinance that specifies what the maximum lot size would be. TR residential allows for a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, I understand.
But
I'm just saying, so really the lots will be 7,000 square feet, then there
that's
won't
the
be
minimum,
anything
right?
bigger.
But they could be larger, correct?
Because I'm just looking at the difference between 40, 20, and 7, and it's like that 7,000 is 17.5% as big as the 40,000. And, even though that 1.5 sounds good, that's still a lot denser than this land is currently zoned for. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes back to us. But that when you do the math, it still makes you think this is a lot denser than what was originally zoned for. So
Yeah, I think the problem is something that we're seeing everywhere in Cary is that they calculate the gross density and say, well, it's a really low overall density, but then you have the squishing, and in this case, they're clustering to be able to save.
Right, all that open space above, right?
To save all that lake and everything, then they have to cluster and get the lot sizes down. And so I guess that's what makes it so challenging, is we're seeing a lot of small lots coming to us.
I mean, I appreciate what Mr. Frank, oh, pardon me, Mr. Urha. I mean, I certainly appreciate the keeping the pond, and I certainly appreciate the open space, but you still think about how those houses are going to be together, that's all. And that area I go through that area a lot. It's in my district. And there's a lot of traffic on those roads, particularly Old Apex.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note, it's a 35-acre parcel. So if they had kind of used these development patterns that we saw like in the early 90s, where you just fill in the ponds and put the streams into people's yards and cut it up into half-acre lots, you'd end up with 70 lots. And this is 50 instead of 50. So we're getting fewer lots. It's just that because they're clustering, they're getting really small. And I guess what the hope is, and the trust is that the quality of the units is going to be so high that it's not going to feel weird that you have these really tiny lots. So,
Mr. Urha.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad the intention is to save the pond, that's for sure. But I'm just wondering, is that something eligible for a condition in the rezoning, or is that a site plan?
That is, well, apparently a site plan has been presented to the adjacent property owners, but it's not part of the request.
It could be, but it isn't.
Well, not a site plan, but they could have specific language regarding open space.
As a
condition.
Yes.
It would be nice to see that, but.
yeah, no, we're going to have to see that. We're going to have to see conditions that basically tie down the promises that are being made to the community. And I think Pulte's aware of that.
That's another time when the residents are seeing a site plan, when we are not approving a site plan at the rezoning. And I caution the residents that if there's something in the site plan that you really want, that you must talk with Pulte about whether or not, and staff, that's possible for a condition, because what you see on paper is not what we're approving.
It's actually a concept plan, it's not even a site plan, right?
I
They're not at
don't know, I
site
thought a
plan.
site plan.
Right, they're really
saying,
showing a
here's what it
concept plan.
could look like.
Right, I see what you're saying. That
could look like.
The definition of what they're
No,
saying.
and no offense to Pulte, that's not an attempt to,
No,
it's
no.
just, that, as you say,
Sometimes
not
visual,
necessarily
for
what
those of us who are visual, a concept or a picture or a sketch of what it could look like is what they're seeing, but that doesn't mean that the developer is tied to that. And I'd hate for the residents and the neighbors to think this is what I'm going to get, and the developer is not tied to that.
And to reiterate one other point that you made, this will not be a council decision unless they're asking for some kind of exception, which would require a quasi-judicial hearing. I know,
The subdivision plan would not be.
yeah, when it gets
That's
to
right.
that part.
because I heard one resident say, consider this when you're looking at the site plan.
Right.
We won't look at the site plan unless something like that happens.
Right. I think it's also important for the citizens who are not usually going through this process to understand is that the council is going to be considering the densities and conditions that are being proposed for this land, but we're not considering Pulte. This doesn't tie Pulte to this land. We are only approving or denying the densities. Let's say if we approve it, we're only approving certain densities and conditions that will go with the land, whether it's Pulte or MI Home or some custom builder.
Exactly right. Basically, what can go on this land and how dense is it going to be? That's basically our decision. Any other questions or comments? Okay. We'll forward this to the Planning and Zoning Board for their consideration and recommendation. That takes us to discussion items. We removed item 6.1 from the agenda at the beginning of this meeting. Our first discussion item is the 2015 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan and 2015 through 19 Consolidated Housing and Community Development Plan. Ms. Stondino will present this item, and council may take action. Ms. Stondino.
Good evening, Town Council. I'm going to be presenting the funding request for the
fiscal year 2015 CDBG Annual Action Plan. The town expects to receive approximately $504,385 in CDBG funds for the next fiscal year from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The amount we received is based on a formula related to our population, housing conditions, and poverty rate. The program is used for a wide variety of activities, including affordable housing, public services, and public infrastructure. However, the overarching requirement is that the funds must benefit low and moderate income individuals and families. In requests for CDBG funds, applications are received from nonprofits and private organizations. We received 9 funding requests, totaling the amount of over $1.3 million in CDBG funds. However, we only have available $759,824 in funding, and that includes our allocation, which is $504,385 in CDBG funds. The funds available, as mentioned, for next fiscal year is anticipated $504,385, reprogram funds $809, program income $79,630, the affordable housing fund, which is contingent upon the fiscal year budget for the town for next year, is $175,000 in requests, totaling $759,824. I'd like to go over the requested amounts and the recommendations for funding. On the affordable housing program, requested funding is $400,000. Recommended funding is $335,000. Habitat for Humanity requested $110,000. The same amount is being recommended for funding. Hospice of Wake County requested $300,000. At this time, we're not recommending any funding for this next fiscal year. Resources for Seniors, $65,000, and the amount that they requested is being recommended. Under Economic Development, Christian Community in Action, Dorcas Ministry requested $50,000. $50,000 is recommended. Facade Improvement Program, $50,000 requested, $50,000 recommended. Section 108 loan repayment, $74,500. Same amount is being recommended for funding. Under Public Facilities, the White Oak Foundation requested funding for community resource building in the amount of $200,000. $0 is being recommended. Under Public Services for their community outreach, White Oak Foundation also requested $50,000. $30,000 is being recommended for funding. Under Administration and Reserves, Admin requested $10,000. $10,000 is being recommended for funding. Reserves for cost overruns is $35,324, and the same amount is being recommended for funding. Staff recommends that the council approve the projects being suggested by staff. The annual action plan and the consolidated plan will be brought forward to the May 8th Town Council meeting for adoption. That will include the approved projects from tonight's discussion. Now I'll turn it over to the Town Council for discussion.
Okay. Council members, questions, comments? Motion.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the proposal from staff, if somebody wants to second it. Then I want to speak to it.
There's a second.
I want to speak to it. I just wanted to go back to the nice gentleman who spoke to us at Public Speaks Out, Mr., I'm going to say his name wrong, I think, but Reberg is what I thought he said. And he talked about the first public hearing we had, and the draft plan was not available for public comment. And he had some really interesting comments, I think, that we should take to heart. Would you tell us whether that's true, and if so, how that happened and how we can rectify that just quickly? Because it was not our intent, obviously, to have a public hearing and not have the public to have an opportunity to comment on the specifics of a plan.
Sure. We've had 2 community meetings advertised on site, online, as well as in the newspaper. One was held on March 5th. The other was held on March 13th. Then we had a public hearing meeting held before council on March the 27th. All those meetings were to encourage citizens to provide input and feedback about the plans. The plans are pretty prescriptive every year in terms of our annual action plan, and this year our consolidated plan is having a different format. But as I spoke with the citizen over the phone as well as communicated with him via email, I provided him all the information that he requested.
So you're talking about this gentleman. When you say
Yes,
the citizen, you mean this
yes,
gentleman.
ma'am.
So you're saying he did have access to the plan?
Yes.
That he wants to come. Okay, that was my question. I appreciate your reviewing that for us, because we take this very seriously every year, and it pains us not to be able to fund every request that comes. But as I or that's made. And as I read the report, I wouldn't have wanted to be in your shoes of having to make these decisions, and I think you actually made very wise ones, and that's why I made the motion to approve.
Other comments? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. This takes us to item 6.3, the Land Development Ordinance Text Amendments, Round 28. Ms. Spearman will present this item, and then council may take action.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. There are 7 items included in this next set of amendments to the Land Development Ordinance. We're requesting that you set a public hearing date of May 22nd for these items. For this presentation, there is background information for each of these items provided in your staff report. I'll be going through each of these briefly, and we'll be requesting feedback on several items as we get to them, as we continue to move forward to prepare some of the specific ordinance text for some of the items prior to the public hearing. The first item is related to food trucks. Currently, food trucks are not allowed except in conjunction with the temporary use permit. The proposed standards that we have developed for starting point for consideration are based on discussion of this topic at previous council meetings and also the staff's review of regulations from other jurisdictions. There's several key aspects to this item that we've looked at closely, including the location where trucks could be located, the hours of operation, and the permitting process and tracking of those. As I mentioned, draft ordinance language, the specific ordinance text will be drafted prior to the public hearing, and based on the feedback that we receive at this time, we will continue with that process. First item I'd like to go over is related to the proposed location. What we had recommended was allowing food trucks on developed private property in non-residential districts, allowing on any property with an approved temporary use permit. And you may also want to consider limited use on residentially zoned property, particularly common space owned by a homeowners association where neighborhood activities are occurring at times where they may not be associated with the temporary use permit. So we would look at some provisions related to that. We would recommend prohibiting the food trucks on streets or public property except in conjunction with the town-sponsored events. One issue that has come up is the notion of providing some separation between brick and mortar restaurants and other food trucks, and we're recommending a 100-foot separation between some of these uses for consideration. And also a separation from lots containing occupied dwellings, so there would be 150 feet from those dwellings to try to minimize the neighborhood impacts. Another item to consider is the hours of operation. We're based on review of other ordinances. Just as a starting point, we're proposing within 150 feet of a residential property to allow the operation from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., elsewhere from 6 a.m. to 3 a.m., and then on a daily basis, the trucks would be removed from the site to be serviced at a commissary. It's required as a portion of the health requirements related to that. And again, I would say these are all time periods that are related just based on looking at other jurisdictions and can certainly be tailored to Cary if you have any specific thoughts on that. With regard to the permitting processes, currently food trucks would be allowed as a component of a temporary event where there's typically a temporary use permit that's required with limited duration, limited number of days per year. What we have would propose is an annual, or to consider the food trucks with an accessory use permit, since it would be located on property within as accessory to some other use on a property. And we would propose an annual permit for the site rather than for individual trucks. And that way, if someone was interested in having the food trucks come to their property, there could be a one-time permit. I would propose a fee of $50 consistent with the current fee for a temporary use permit, and that would cover for a year's period. We would have an opportunity to keep a record of where the permits were allowed for, to make sure there were the spacing was proper to allow those uses. So based on those comments, at this time I would ask if there's any specific comments or direction that you would like to give us from there as we finalize the draft text to bring to the public hearing. And then, of course, through the public hearing process, there's continued opportunity for refinement.
Questions, comments on food trucks?
Go ahead.
We'll start on that end.
Go end to end. No, we've had some preliminary discussions, of course, on this issue, and I think you've done a great job in capturing, at least according to my notes, all of the things that we had talked about first. I think it's excellent. The one thing, though, that I know we did not ever talk about that I can recall are the hours of operation. And that's the thing that I know caught my eye on here, too. 3 a.m., really? I just wonder if that's a little, I don't even call it too late or too early.
21 hours of operation.
It just seems strange. I know you're saying that's consistent with other jurisdictions. Is that what you're?
And that is something that we can get your feedback on. That would cover for some, events that may last into the evening, but certainly if that period of time seems too lengthy, that can be tailored to.
To me, it seems a little lengthy, but that's the only thing here that caught my eye, actually.
Okay, Ms. Bush.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mary Bierman for the lengthy food truck conversation I had. But one thing that I had heard concerns of from citizens, or particularly from the HOAs, who have several of these trucks come through, whether it's for farmers, a farmer's market / in Weatherstone, they do that. Some of the HOAs that don't have food capability anymore, like in Preston Village, have them come at a particular time when the pool is open. So I think that the information about HOA, and specifically calling it out so that when our citizens are reading it, will be very helpful to them. So thank you for adding that language.
Maybe I missed it in the staff report. If I did, I'm sorry. But that speaks to where the food trucks would not be allowed in like areas zoned residential. Mm-hmm. Does that apply to construction sites?
That is for non-residential subdivisions, that would not fall under commercial sites. So if that's something that you would want to allow, we would need to make sure that that's addressed. If it's a matter of construction sites for residential development for, while the construction activity is going on. If we were to provide some provisions related to the residential, allowing on residential use for HOAs, for example, we could also look at extending that for other residential properties if you wanted to narrow the scope down. We would.
I guess I wouldn't want to prevent a food truck from going to a construction site, whether that's a commercial or residential product that's being constructed.
Okay.
Obviously, once the neighborhood or the subdivision is constructed, then it's different. But during the construction, I would be open to allowing that.
Yes.
Okay.
Very.
We could craft that to allow it in residential districts, but within those districts, limit the circumstances so that it would need to be while it was under construction or for limited time periods, whatever options you would deem appropriate for that.
I would prefer while under construction.
While under construction, okay.
Everything else, I thought you guys did a phenomenal job. But yeah, I guess after Ed's comments too, I'm like, 3 a.m., yeah.
Okay.
Whatever. We could kill ourselves over-regulating this, though.
I too think 3 a.m. is, you're asking us for feedback so you don't craft something that we later come in and say take out 3 a.m. So I would just say take out 3 a.m. now and make it consistent with the food trucks that aren't adjacent to residential property. And I think that's what, 10 or 11 is what you had. I think it was 10 p.m. And I just think they should be consistent, that's all. If you got to throw a dart, just make it a consistent dart.
Sounds good.
Okay. Other comments?
Well, at first I was kind of taken aback by the 3 a.m. I've heard that in Europe, in Ireland and places like that, when certain establishments close, that's where the food trucks are. So maybe I'm assuming that's what's going on here.
I don't know. I mean, I drive around at 10:30 at night, and I'm the only one driving. So.
Like when we go home, do you see anything?
My point is, if you're trying to
Start a new business.
if you're trying to provide a service after certain things are closed, I guess my concern is, does it create a problem? And what your point is that you think we're over-managing it?
I said you could overregulate this.
Okay.
I'm not saying we are.
And my only point was why have different
My feeling
hours
is
for
that if
when
we
we're.
go with that 3 a.m., that's watched closely, and if we see that becoming problematic, we've always had the right to change.
Yeah, that's
and
right. We
update
can go
it.
back and change it later.
Yeah, I don't know if 10's the magic number,
Just be consistent is
If
what
you're
I'm saying.
trying
I
to
don't
find
think it
something,
matters.
happy medium, it's a midnight or something, and then just monitor it. And then if we find after some time that it's not working for us, we can amend it.
Sounds good.
So there was no consensus there. What do you want to hear from us now? I heard 10, 11, 12. I heard some people say not 3. What do you
I
want?
recommend that we go with Gail's recommendation of being consistent.
Yeah, so you want to go with midnight. Do you want to go with 10? I mean, I just think they ought to be the same, and it shouldn't be 3
I guess, Mike, what is the time of consistency?
Well, just that they both end at start and end at the same time. That's all. Go back to slide, it's either 65 or 66, Mary. And it shows you the differing times for where the food truck is. I was wrong. Oh, well, it was 66. Okay, so you see that if you're within 150 feet of residential, it's 7 to 10, and elsewhere it's 6 to 3. And I'm saying, why not just be consistent? But I hear some concern about 3, so maybe 6 to midnight, or I mean, there's no science to that. We just need to pick something.
So you want to throw a dart?
Yeah, I'm going to say midnight.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds good. I'm seeing a lot of heads nod.
Go with midnight.
Sure.
We're going to start with midnight.
Sure. We'll see how many people.
I'm not up that late
Same
either.
start time, same ending time.
You are right where you go.
So,
Anything else on food trucks? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
no. It's a club anyway. They're not interested in food.
Jack is dancing.
The next
Jack has
item.
been clubbing.
Sorry.
When you need a taco, you need a taco.
Please proceed.
Don't mind us.
Don't mind us.
Just ignore us.
Yeah, we're just,
The next item is related to rezoning procedures, and this item is a follow-up from your 2013 council retreat and also a subsequent council meeting and a work session. The items that were raised there with regard to the rezoning procedures included the timing of required public information meetings that we now hold prior to, or the applicants hold prior to submittal of rezoning applications, whether or not to allow or require concept plans as zoning conditions, and we've spoken to that a bit tonight as it was raised in the previous zoning case, and also the extent to which approved development plans or plans approved by town council could be modified through the process. With regard to the neighborhood meetings, I'll talk about that item first. Currently, the neighborhood meetings are held by the applicant prior to submittal of a rezoning request. There has been some concern raised with that. The council direction at your work session last October was to shift the timing of that meeting until after submittal of the rezoning request and have staff and potentially council members attend that meeting as well. In trying to prepare ordinance text for this, we did come up with 2 options that we wanted to get your feedback on in carrying this out. Option 1 would essentially just shift the same type of meeting that's required now to a time that's after the submittal of the process or the submittal of the rezoning request. This would be an individual meeting scheduled by the applicant, could be held at various times and locations within the community. With the changes that we're looking at, staff would attend those meetings as well, so there'd be a coordination issue and a timing issue related to those. The second option, which is actually what staff is recommending, would be to hold individual concurrent meetings at the town hall or possibly some other location in the community that could vary depending on how many rezonings were coming in a different month or with the locations. but with the focus being to try to consolidate those meetings so that they're held at the same time. Those meetings could be preceded by a staff-led meeting that would orient the citizens to the process, and then break off into the individual meetings with the applicants. And this is something where we're recommending the second option just as a timing issue. We have some concerns that depending on the workflow that comes in, the number of submittals we get on a given month, that trying to coordinate all of those meetings would really spread the process out. So that was an attempt to balance out some of the issues that we see with that. The second item that came up related to the rezonings concerns the concept plans for conditional use rezoning request. And again, two options with this point. One is whether to require a concept plan for all conditional rezoning cases, or whether to allow it as an option for conditional use cases. And in some cases, there may be some circumstances if the applicant is, describing specific development activity that they're proposing, or certain characteristics of a development that lends itself to a concept plan, then perhaps requiring it in those cases. But the feedback that we would like to get is basically whether to, as a rule, require it at all times, so that when someone comes in for a rezoning, there would, by necessity, need to be some level of detail provided, or whether that would be an option that could be allowed, and then we could set up some specific criteria so that when you do have the concept plan required or offered, that it would be, very clear with what information would be on that and how much detail there would be. So that's another aspect we would like to get your feedback on. And then the third item is related to modification of council-approved concept plans that could come forward with rezoning cases, or other development plans that council has approved. We're proposing that council approval, which would be through a quasi-judicial hearing for site plans, or in the case of rezoning conditions, it could require an additional rezoning process, that step be required for any changes that would modify any allowable land uses that would be shown on a plan, would increase any residential density or non-residential square footage, or reduce any buffer or streetscape widths or standards. And then that was our starting point, and we just wanted to see if there were any other specific items that you had concern with that you would want us to include in the first draft of the ordinance as it's brought to you for the public hearing. So at this time, I would like to check in and see if you have any comments or direction based on those three items and the various options that we've considered.
Okay, let's take neighborhood meetings. Yes.
I like option 2 for all the reasons that you mentioned, Mary. I think that we often, all of us have gone to neighborhood meetings where it's just unclear to the citizens how the rezoning process works, and there's a steep learning curve for this. So the opportunity to provide them with education about the process is really going to be very beneficial to them from the beginning, and to get it from staff, the most knowledgeable people about it. I think that's great, and I totally understand the coordination issue of having it at town hall so that where the staff is. So for those reasons, I support option 2.
And for that last reason, I have concerns about it. If you're in a neighborhood and you got to go to town hall to speak, you're probably not going to go unless, you're really upset about something. It'd be nice if we could use technology. If you could call in.
We could.
Or have it streaming so you could watch it or something.
Well, that would be nice.
Then you could have both worlds. But I'm really concerned about, you got to go to town hall to find out what the developer's going to do. I think what you're going to have is a group of people go, and then they're going to go back and tell the rest of the neighborhood, then you get it secondhand.
The way it is now.
That can be framed any kind of way.
What it is now. Yeah. I think that the only concern that I saw with this is that it could lead citizens to the perception that the town is backing the applicant and
That's true.
endorsing the proposal. So I think that's kind of a concern.
That's a very good point.
Although I have to say that the one point that's made here that I think is that we've all expressed concern about is having a single source of truth, which at that point is staff. They are giving the guidelines to the residents. We take the single source of truth when they present it to us. And I think there's something very valuable by having staff involved in the preamble of the meeting saying, here's what we do, here's our roles and responsibilities, here's why we're here, and then setting the stage.
And they're totally agnostic about the issue of whether this should be rezoned.
Exactly.
They're just, here's the process.
But wouldn't, for option one, didn't you say that staff would also be present at those meetings, staff and council for that matter? Isn't that part of option one?
Yes, option one, both options, staff would be present. So
So the
if there,
only difference is the location and the central location and the specific time.
correct. Under the first option, well, as an example, last month we received 6 rezoning applications. So if that were to be in place and there were the separate meetings, there would be a very short window of time that we would have to coordinate with the applicants to get meeting places set up. The meeting places would be different, the days would be different, and we would have to have the staffing available to get to those meetings, which could be done, but with the available staff resources that we have for that much activity to occur within a very short time frame due to advertising requirements and whatnot, there would be a much greater likelihood that some of those rezoning cases would really get stretched out time-wise in order for staff to be able to absorb the scheduling for all those meetings to still be able to hit our mandatory advertising deadlines.
You said something very important. That just jumped into my head. You talked about advertising. Is this a public meeting that would be advertised?
Well, there would be, the advertising is for the rezoning, the public hearing itself.
But the neighborhood meeting?
The neighborhood meeting, there would be notices sent for the neighborhood meeting.
Just
By the applicant, though, right?
by the applicant.
Correct.
Because it's still the applicant's responsibility to schedule a neighborhood
Correct.
So
regardless
you were
of what's
talking about
held.
advertising for the
Right,
hearing and the
Right.
public meeting that's at the council table, not for the neighborhood meeting.
Right, the advertising that the staff does is for the public hearing.
Okay.
But when you look at our schedules and, the deadlines for when plans are, requests are submitted, and then there's a period for review and a period to have the meetings, when you look at the window to have the meeting, to send the notices out, and to get all of these items coordinated and conduct the meetings turns out to be relatively small in the context of looking at the overall schedule for the rezoning requests. So.
I see option one very similar to what we are doing today, and it is very difficult for staff to attend all those different meetings. And I think as we're seeing things slowly turn around and the rezoning requests and such are increasing that are coming to the council and to the town, that's only going to get worse. I think that if we genuinely want staff to be there, which we do, the most logical way to do it is to just schedule that one meeting a month and have everybody here all at the same time. We've got the resources here should we need to grab something, print something, whatever. And we're not constantly pulling staff out of the office to go to this meeting or go to that meeting. At the end of the day, they're going to work 40, 45 hours a week. If they're spending a few hours, 2 evenings a week, going to these meetings, that's 6-8 hours a week. They're no longer in the office because they've got to take that time off. So I would support trying option two, just like we've done with a lot of things in the past, as kind of I don't want to say a pilot, but you try it, you see how it works, and reevaluate. And if it's working, great. If we need to tweak it, we can tweak it. But I do think it would make it a lot less demanding on town staff. Better encourage their participation. So at this time, I would support going with option 2. To the mayor's comments about if you have if they're not in the community, then a lot of folks might not attend and may only a few people might only come. I've been to a number of community meetings that were held at Bond Park or community centers and such, and there have been 30, 40, 50 residents show up. I mean, when it's important to folks, they come, and whether it's here or a community center or a clubhouse in their community. So,
I think you're right, Don, and I just think that our staff needs to be very careful as it articulates to the citizens that it is not representing the applicant in any way.
Right. And if council members are there too, we can also help in that regard.
One other thing I'd like to point out that I, honestly, when I read through this, I thought was one of the most important, I'd like to thank staff for doing that, is the change you made to the notification area from 400 feet to 800 feet. That speaks to some of the issues that we've seen with, specifically going back to the Mills-Patterson case and several others, where the notification area wasn't broad enough to really include the people in which the rezoning touched. And I know it's not required by law, but it's the right thing to do, and I'd like to thank staff for putting that in there.
And the other thing I'd add is just to remind myself and all of us that what we're doing is just choosing an option to go to public hearing. We'll hear from the citizens at public hearing if this is something that sounds good to them versus with all, warts and all, they prefer the current process. So I think that is, again, speaks to option 2.
Do you want a straw poll for, I'm an option 2 girl too. Sorry. I thought he was.
Mr. Smith. Leave the geezer for last.
You always do.
The problem I was trying to address is that, as you said, more and more applications are coming in, and you've got developers going out and setting up meetings, and we don't even know what's going on. That was what I was...
Typically.
That's all I was trying to resolve. What I want to know, I think the simplest thing is that if meetings are going to be scheduled by the developer so that they can present their concept, they at least need to let us know that they're meetings so that, an hour after the meeting, they've already started a petition to deny something that hasn't even come in for us to be considered. That's the problem I'm trying to fix. I'm trying to get in front of it so that, one, you can calm some people down about the expectations. The problem I'm getting with all these infills is there's 2 aspects. One, we don't even know what's coming in, we, the town, and I. So when you're getting these calls or all of a sudden these chain emails, which all say basically the same thing, and I call, you call the staff and they say, well, we haven't heard about anything yet. So I want to somehow get some responsibility to the developer. I think it is good that they're reaching out and meeting. Then the other dimension to it is there are nuances on how sometimes the conditions are that the developer is proposing are conveyed to the community that, maybe to the letter of the law are exactly right, but to the spirit, they're being a little bit disingenuous or misrepresenting. And that also then inflames the situation and concern. And then the third component is a lot of times this is the very first experience citizens have with having to deal with the town. So we're not there. And a myriad of questions come up that are just a lot of level of detail, and that's where I was looking for something like where you have a pre-meeting, or I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but it's like you need like a frequently asked questions so that when people call and say, well, what about buffers? Are they allowed to walk on our property? Are they allowed to do this? That we can get those. That's where I wanted the staff involvement. But I'm not sure it's right in the investment of time as, to go with option 1. I'm open to 2, but I want to make sure we're solving the problem that I was bringing up, and that is that we know about it in advance.
That's right.
And then, from a legal perspective, I think the question. I've always been reluctant to go to those pre-meetings because I want to keep them open. I don't want them to become adversarial. I want them to be where a developer can come in and say, here's what I want to do adjacent to your community. And when the first person says, heck no, or stronger language, and then looks at us and says, what are you going to do to stop it? I don't want that to happen at that meeting. I don't think that's a forum. That's the meeting that people should be listening and having dialogue. And I'm just not sure these options are addressing that. So I'm looking for your feedback as my peers. Am I missing the point here? I just want to make sure we're notified and that people have a known contact. That was the other issue. It's like when they call me, I was like, I don't know about it. And then I've got to go through 3 or 4 phone calls just to get to who would be the staff person. And in respect for your time, I think it would be better if we just had some condition where we knew where to direct those calls. And I think we can nip a lot of the angst and the anxiety.
I would agree with a lot of what you said, Mr. Smith. Not only does this notify us and the citizens, but it also helps to educate them about the process. And I think that's an important part of it that has been commented on before. It's still not working out very well for us and staff. For some of the reasons you said you don't attend the community meeting, those are some of the reasons I do attend the community meeting.
Well, let me, for the record, if I know about it, I typically
You do go, Jack.
But I think there's a concern about that. If, let's say we have a denial, are we at risk? This is where we need, I think, legal advice. Are we at risk saying that we've, tainted the water? We've not been fair in our actions. Mm-hmm. And that's why I worry about attending those meetings. So as long as I have guidelines on those meetings, I'm fine. I want to be there.
Yeah. I think also option 2 will resolve one of the issues that we have where applicants don't know the council schedule, and they schedule these meetings on nights where we're in a work session, and then citizens are like, why weren't you there? And you're like, well, because I'm committed to something else. And if our staff is planning these meetings, you'll do it around the council calendar to ensure that one of the representatives would be able to make it.
Especially if we have a number of different cases that's all being discussed at the same night. We'll probably have multiple council members there because they're probably going to be in different areas of town.
That's right.
So I'm hearing the majority say number 2 with Mr. Smith says, I think it's number 2 with some adjustments. So, okay. Conditional use rezoning cases.
What is the downside with option 1?
Staff? Yeah. What is the downside to option 1?
Option 1 for?
Concept plans for conditional use.
Requiring for all the conditional use cases. There may be cases where, for example, you could have a conditional use case where the zoning conditions that are offered don't necessarily limit the development to one use. Quite often we'll have zoning cases where they'll be limited to single family at a certain density or townhomes at a certain density, but that's not necessarily the case. So if there's multiple uses that could be allowed, then obviously if the developer doesn't have the degree of certainty to know if it's somewhat speculative still. There may be cases where the property owner is maybe selling the property. There may not be a specific seller, but trying to at least perhaps get a district up from R40 to sell a property. So there could be some circumstances where there just wouldn't be enough information to provide a development plan.
That's fair enough.
Well, I was wondering if we could have it, take option 1 with required, and then maybe with the exception of, and stipulate some of those things that you were just saying, as opposed to just allowing it as an option, which we may never see.
I think we could put some standards together where if there were certain criteria that were met, then a mandatory requirement could kick in. For example, if there were a concept plan that were shown to council or the neighbors where, in the cases where it becomes very clear what the intent is and that there is a specific intent. And that may, conceivably, that could be a requirement for showing a sketch. If you're going to show a sketch to try to show that that's what you're intending to do, then that would be a way that you would need to commit to it.
Is there any way we could do something where we say an applicant for rezoning has the incentive to submit a concept plan, and if the applicant does that, then he doesn't need to do a subdivision plan before the council? Presumably, like if he doesn't do a concept plan, then he has to bring it over to council? Bring a subdivision plan to council, so he has the incentive to kind of come up with this concept early?
You'd have to bring that as quasi-judicial, or just bring it as a matter of routine action?
Subdivision plan would address a lot of different issues that you wouldn't necessarily see in the concept plan.
Right.
What if they had to bring the concept, they could bring the concept plan at rezoning, or they might have to bring a concept plan to the council in conjunction with their subdivision plan submitted to staff? Could you do anything like that?
So after the rezoning requirement that they then.
Yes, and then the concept plan approval by the council is an element of their subdivision plan review.
I don't know that we've got authority to do something like that.
Because it used to be, a long time ago, council used to review subdivision plans. And there was just a greater level of certainty from citizens that what they were concerned about was going to get addressed. It's been a long time since we did that, and I don't know what exactly the state law was that changed that or whatever, but I think what we're trying to do is we have citizens that come to us and they express these concerns, and the applicant says, oh, I'm going to address that with these conditions, and it would be like this. And so then the citizens go, phew, I feel good about this now. And then when it actually comes to fruition, it doesn't meet those visions at all that are presented. So how do we get around that legally?
I do like the concept of incenting these concept plans, but to do that, they got to get something out of it.
Yeah.
And what are we allowed to give them, I guess, is what we're struggling with. Because I see how requiring all of them is problematic. Maybe not so much for residential as commercial, but problematic. But at the same time, we do want to encourage those if we can. Please, help.
I actually liked Mary's kind of compromise, the hybrid, to take option one and give some examples. I know that every time you laundry list, you take the risk of leaving something important out, but it seems like a decent first step to say concept plans are required for all conditional use cases when the following exists, or something like that. And it sounds like you have a pretty...
What do you think the following exists would be? What would that list look like?
She started with a few.
I mean, that's something, I mean, we could look at that notion and bring something back more fleshed out for the hearing, but I guess some examples, things that you could look at were the surrounding neighborhood. If it's a smaller, infill type property, it's completely developed around it, depending on the neighborhood, and it's something that in order to rezone that property, that was a specific area that you really wanted to have that degree of a little more specificity for what was being required before the rezoning occurred, or as part of that, then you could have, criteria based on the surrounding area and the potential impacts. You could well, we would look at other criteria.
Seems a little unfair to put you on the spot to come up with all this.
I didn't know if you already had ideas about that.
It does sound like the majority of us really would prefer a 1B or a hybrid or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a reasonable step.
Not really one or two, but something in between, so.
Yeah, well, I would
flesh it out more.
prefer the one with
Right.
exceptions,
talking about.
such as...
If it's okay to council, we'll have them work on something.
Yeah. Bring it back.
One other point that just came to me that I could add is that in some cases when there are cases where the applicant is selling the rezoning, or his, the justification includes more description where it's obvious that there's a specific product or specific layout, some specific feature of property that would be maintained. For example, if there's a pond on the property and they're proposing to maintain that. And in order to do that, it sort of sets the stage somewhat for how roads would be laid out and those kinds of things. So I think there are some cases where those kind of criteria could lend themselves to having an illustration of what the applicant is trying to request. And there may be some ways that we could come up with criteria to help guide that, to have a way that could be required, certainly allowed, and then possibly required in those cases.
But at the same time, I worry that it could also be a disincentive for them to do it. It's like, okay, well, if I keep this wonderful, beautiful pond, now I have to do the concept plan. Maybe if I just fill this thing in, I don't have to do that. Not saying they would, but just, it's that.
Yeah, we don't want unintended consequences.
Right.
Well, again, what we're making the decision about is what to take to public hearing. That's the good news, is that we're not actually making this decision.
Understood.
So
I would just love something that incents them, that really makes it worth their while to do it. And then it also addresses our concerns that what's shown to the citizens is what's built. Because I think all of us are sick and tired of things getting proposed to us, sold to us. They show us the pretty pictures and everything else. And isn't this wonderful? And then when it's built, it's like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
So, Ms. Bierman, do you feel good about that, or you need more clarity?
I think we can work with that.
Okay.
We can provide some text for that. That may certainly be modified as it continues through the process, but I think we can get a step closer for something for the public hearing.
Okay, very good. Modification of approved plans.
I love these three, and I can't think of any more. Jennifer?
No.
A lot of times you can see the holes in this.
We good with these?
I have no concern.
Right now, I'm fine with the three.
Great.
Those are
Yeah,
good
start with
ones.
this. I'd like to hear if citizens have some other things. I mean, I think that we should be specifically asking.
It's a good three.
Okay. Anything else for?
Well, yeah. Do we want to have a percentage type of threshold for, I mean, if they add 1 unit, do we want to look at it? If they reduce a buffer 1 foot, do we want to look at it? Do we need to set a percentage, some kind of a threshold?
What was your thought in thinking about the language that would come to us, Mary? Did you have an idea of density increased by more than 5% or buffer decreased by more than X percent? I mean, was there a thought to
Well,
that?
we do have, in sections of the ordinance of director's modification that can kick in for minor changes up to 10%. So, I mean, if you're interested in some thresholds, we could come up with some options to present with that for the public hearing,
Options
depending
are always
on your.
good.
It's that unintended consequence if they come back every time with a 3% and a 3% and a 3%.
If there's a cumulative effect.
Right.
We could deal with it cumulatively.
But nonetheless, I mean, we've seen projects that have been proposed, and they use this variance in this one element, and variance in this one element, and variance in this one element, and by the time you add up all those variances that they've been able to slide under without the council having to look at it, then it looks like a different project. I'm thinking of some of these mixed-use projects that we've seen come out different than what we thought. I want us to be careful about how much latitude we grant when we're giving those variances. Just, I mean, make it fair, but just make sure we're protecting ourselves too.
Okay, we can take that into account and try to craft something as a starting point.
Okay, very good.
Okay. The next item, this item C is related to slab-on-grade construction. These revisions are proposed to address some changes in the North Carolina State Building Code and construction practices while maintaining the goal of providing aesthetic appeal for the homes that are constructed with slab-on-grade construction. Currently, the LDO includes a couple of provisions to give the appearance of a foundation wall even when there is a slab. And those key criteria are a minimum of 2 steps required for the entrance, and that the masonry product at the, there's a masonry product at the base of the outer walls with a minimum height of 3 courses of brick. The proposed amendment would eliminate the requirements for the steps and change the minimum height for the masonry material from 3 courses of brick to 12 inches above grade. Just to clarify that standard. One of the key questions that we have with this is related to what constitutes an acceptable masonry material for the foundation. We're proposing along the front facade to limit the material to brick, stone, or modular block. Then the question is raised too. Another type of masonry material that's commonly used is parging, which is a thin layer of a brushed or sprayed on concrete. And we see this particularly on the sides and rears of homes at times. We've got two options that we'd like your feedback on for the sides and rear, whether or not to allow the parging. If the parging is allowed, we would propose that the foundation plantings be required to soften that side, particularly where the building is set back at least 5 feet from the property line, and or if it's located on a corner lot that's more visible. So we're proposing 2 options there. One, to allow the parging, which is a frequent practice, with the softening with the additional landscaping, or a second option, which would be to specify that the only acceptable masonry materials on all sides of the buildings would be brick, stone, or modular block. So that was another aspect of that amendment that we wanted to get your feedback on.
And right now, does it read, our current ordinance read brick, stone, or modular block only, or does it allow the parging?
Well, right now it reads masonry material, so this is a clarification regarding the masonry material.
It says masonry materials, but also it says equal to 3 courses of brick.
Right.
So does somebody just go in and measure, say, okay, 3 courses of brick is equal to this many inches, so I've put in stone or I've put in parging and I've made it that many inches? Is that how the developer is handling it?
Yes, in terms of looking at the material and looking at the height with the courses of brick.
And is there something with the state law change with the termite inspection? I didn't quite understand that would prevent us from being able to do it with brick, stone, or modular block?
For that question, I'd like to ask Rob Wilson to come speak to that. I know he's had a number of experiences in the field with these details.
Good evening. State building code has changed on a couple of occasions since this requirement was adopted, and it's made it hard to achieve the requirement with solid brick or stone, but there are veneer products that could be used. But the answer to your earlier question, it does read brick, stone, or other masonry material, and parging being a concrete is an other masonry material. So currently it is an accepted practice as the ordinance is currently worded. The question is that meeting the intent of the original ordinance as things have evolved per the changes in state building code? We do believe there are veneer products that could be used, and there are approaches that are being used on the front of the homes now that could be applied. It's a question of preference. Obviously, the market appraisers tend to recognize and add more value for the front of the homes and the quality and expense of the products that go into those. They don't recognize, really for the side or the rear of the homes. And so option 1 would be consistent with current industry practices. Option 2 would be above and beyond what's currently being performed, and could be achieved with a solid or a veneer product. So.
Does our current ordinance only pertain to the front of the building? It only requires 3 courses of brick for the front of the building, or does it require it for the whole building?
It requires the 3 courses of brick or stone or other masonry material for the perimeter of the home.
Okay. All right. When we created this, we put the 2 steps in, but I remember we put an exception for age-restricted housing. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
There's a restriction both by community, if it's an age-restricted community, such as Carolina Preserve at Amberley.
Yeah.
There's also an exception by individual home that can be approved by the planning director.
Okay. can we keep our system just the way it is? Can we keep our ordinance the way it is? I like the way it is. I like the fact that we are, I mean, I would say not use the parging, but can we require it for the whole perimeter of the building? If we do the brick, stone, or modular block, can we do it for the whole perimeter of the building and not just say the facade?
We certainly can, and that's option 2. That's
Okay,
what we're
good.
looking for
I'd go with
feedback on
option
tonight.
2, and I think we still require the 2 steps. It makes a big difference when you look at a house that is level and you just walk in versus having that little bit of height.
Okay. I don't have a problem with the 2 steps or not 2 steps. I have to ask myself, when we're all upset about House Bill 150 and wondering why our legislators might be looking at this, option 2 is a perfect example why. Onerous requirement that, I mean, shoot, most builders don't even brick the sides of the rear of the house, they just brick the front. But at my business in downtown, we have this rather tall retaining wall on this, separates the main building from the lower parking lot. That entire wall is parged. Looks like a concrete-y stucco. We capped it with brick to make that look pretty, but at the end of the day, it doesn't look bad. I genuinely wonder what problem we're trying to solve here. And I'm more so worried that when our legislators are considering HB 150, going to option 2 does not help our case at all. I think it's an overly onerous requirement.
Other thoughts?
If I could add a little bit
I understand your point. I think that parging used appropriately is fine. The fact of the matter is that we've had an influx of developers come into this community and use cheaper practices to build homes, and it's cheapening Cary. And do we want it to continue? Or are we trying to stop it and try to raise the bar for the aesthetics of Cary? You know, if you don't like the aesthetics of Cary being higher, you are more than welcome to go to another community that doesn't have high standards. You may build in another community. You may go and choose to occupy a residence in another community. I think it's completely wrong of the state legislators to get involved in mandating the aesthetics that a community chooses to place on itself. And usually the aesthetics that we're trying to pursue are ones that our citizens support and want. They want high standards. And so I'm not going to shy away from that. If we think that that's at all a concern, I would say let's put this on hold, wait for 150 to be voted on, and then pick this back up again. But I don't want to cower to the threat of House Bill 150 at all.
I appreciate your comments and your passion for it, and I can't entirely disagree with why. I've just never been contacted by a citizen, resident, business owner, or anything on a complaint that the back of somebody's house didn't have brick or something around the foundation. I like the option of requiring bushes or some type of shrubbery. I think that goes a long way.
And that's harder because, you know, there are lots of people who move into a house and have a hard time maintaining their shrubbery. So then, does the town then have to go out and say, look, you have parging on the side of your building, Mr. Homeowner, you need to get those shrubs back up at, you know, to standard. That seems harder to pursue. I mean, what do you say, that you just require it for the initial building and then you don't ever require it again? And then, I don't know, that just seems really tricky to me to use the plantings as a way to improve the aesthetics.
Ms. Bush, you wanted to say something?
Well, I just want to ask a question because a lot of this is new to me, so I had to look up parging in the pictures and realize that actually in my neighborhood there's a lot of homes that are built on a hill that are, the side is either cinder block and then parged over it. I didn't realize what that was, and I never even thought about it. So I guess my question is, this is a stronger restriction, what we have here for option 2 is a stronger restriction than what we have today. Is that correct?
It's a stronger restriction than our application of the current ordinance language today, yes. The use of the term other masonry material has opened the door for parging to be utilized as a technique. It's a question of, does that still meet the intent of the original ordinance, or does it not? And that's,
Do you have any idea or indication how often parging is used, or if we've had complaints, or if there's, are there these wide variances in parging done well and parging done not well? I mean, this is all new to me, so I'm just asking the question.
Parging is predominantly used on the side and the rear of all of the slab-on-grade product that's currently being built in the western portion of town. We have not received any complaints from citizens about parging at this time that I'm aware of.
Because I go back to the question that Mr. France started with, was what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And I don't know that I ever saw it as,
Some ambiguity, and we're trying to clarify what exactly we
which is
meant.
already happening in town. Right, okay.
We're also trying to maintain a high standard that, keeps us one of the places that you want to live, work, and play. And part of that is not cheapening the process or making it look less attractive.
But I've been to France Automotive, and I didn't know that was parged, and it looked very nice to me. So I guess that's what, it's the cheapening. Is it cheapening it, or is it when it's done poorly, it's cheapening, and how do you legislate poorly done parging?
By going with option 2, that's how you legislate.
Poorly parged.
I got a question. Are you done? I'm sorry, I didn't want to,
No, go ahead.
We have some older sections, and some houses, I think, have been removed, and then we ended up putting in some modular homes. And what I'm trying to recall is when they went in, they had to have, some pretty high standards, around it. Were they required to do what we're calling option 1, or was that more like option 2? I'm talking about at Hilldale Forest.
Yeah.
The reason I'm saying is that once it was done, and I think, the feedback I got from the citizens afterwards was an effort was made to make it fit with the community, and you could make a compelling argument that it's better than some of the aging structures there. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. I just don't want to see things getting where there's an easy way out to do it cheaper. You got to strike that balance, and I'm willing to take the risk that affects us with the legislators. I think it's a sad situation that we have to even think about that or bring that up for discussion, but it's just the way it is.
I don't see anybody changing anybody's minds. We want to do a show of hands, see where we are. How about option 1? Option 2? Looks like option 2.
No vote or Ed?
Question mark by this one, actually.
Go ahead.
And
again, it's for public hearing.
Right, that's good to remember.
Right.
Is that
Right.
this is for a public, and we have more time to think about this.
And go out and look in Western Cary and see.
But my big question mark here is that
And Hillsdale.
I know you're trying to clarify things and try and find out make sure we're true to the original intent here, and that's a worthwhile aim. But if what's going on now really isn't causing a problem that we know of, I mean, I'd almost not do option 1 or 2. I mean, I'd just keep on going as long.
But there's some ambiguity, and staff needs to know what was your original intent.
Well,
That's the question.
We've talked, and we can't really come to a consensus.
3 courses of brick is a difficult measurement to apply in the field. It's not very transparent. So having a specific dimension that we can go out and measure, would be helpful. So we are trying to fine tune this to make it clearer what the town, what the community is looking for, so that builders know what they're aiming for, and then it's easier for us to judge it at the end, when we're doing our final site inspections. So perhaps if you let us use the language, use option 2, we can take it to the public hearing. You may hear from members of the business, the building community, you may not. But that will give people something they can react to, and then you'll always have the opportunity to discuss it further at that time and decide whether you veered in the right direction or maybe not. But we can certainly come back with option 2, for the public hearing and see what you hear from citizens and the members of the building community at that time. There's several layers to this. I'd like to go back just a moment, if you'd indulge me, and talk a bit about the steps. And maybe the thing to do is to show you a picture. One of the key things with the steps, achieving the 2 steps is challenging with the slab-on grade. Depending on how it's done, it can add a lot of expense. And our thought was the intent of the steps was to add to the appearance of the home. Let me just show you an example. This is a slab-on-grade product. Let's see if I can get this to, there we go. This is a slab-on-grade product, and as you can see, this is a model home. It was constructed without the steps to provide handicap accessibility. But you can see how they've dressed up the front of the home to provide the appearance of stone or masonry. And in this case, we didn't have to worry about measuring 3 courses of brick. They're well above the height of that, which would be somewhere around 7, 8, 8.5 inches, depending on the type of brick and mortar that's used. But we believe that this type of approach, which is not uncommon, you do see amenities on the front of a lot of the homes. Buyers like that. The appearance of the home from the street's important. They're willing to pay for that. It's recognized by appraisers and added as part of the value of the home. And let's see if I can get to the next slide. Nope. Try again. Here we go. This is a little closer. You can see the product up closer here as you move closer to the door. As we turn and we look at the side of the home, though, this is parging. So you can see how they've shifted. And this suggestion, if you were to continue to allow parging, which we're moving towards option 2 and we're not, but just to give you the visual, if you required the landscaping, it would look something like this instead. So it distracts, softens the view. The maintenance of the shrubs would be up to the homeowner, of course. So we'd be glad to bring back option 2 as far as the materials. But as far as the steps, the ability for residents to age in place is the other key consideration here. If we require the steps, then they're there permanently. Folks after 15, 20, 25, 30 years, depending on how long they live there, what age they are when they move in, it can become a constraint. It can require people to move. We were just suggesting while we're revisiting this part of the ordinance, it appears that with the appropriate requirements, you can get the masonry material, not the parging, the actual brick or stone look that we think was the original intent. You can get that without the steps. And so we were suggesting consideration of moving in that direction.
Thoughts on the steps?
Okay, first of all, don't ever show us model homes again as the example, because model homes are always souped up. I mean, they're always the best looking one of the lot. So it's kind of like you look at it and you're like, oh, that's great. But then, you have to pay the extra, allowance to be able to get the stone up the side. I respect the idea of aging in place. I don't think that 2 steps requirement is going to be the thing that keeps somebody from being able to stay in his home. I mean, if you look at the weighing the difference between having our community look better and having many, I mean, we're talking about thousands of homes that are going up in Western Cary versus the number of people who want to age in place. I just don't see it being a fair balance. I mean, we're trying to look at, at our overall aesthetics. What does our community look like? What year did slab end up really starting to take place? Like, when did we start seeing it in the construction of houses as the majority of houses in Cary? When did that happen?
I'm not going to be able to give you numbers
Okay.
or even a range. That's something we can look into and
I would
come
be
back.
very interested in
Yeah,
knowing
we'll
when
be
that
glad.
was, because we went from one point of having a lot of crawl space homes to shifting over to having a lot of on slab construction. And one of the things that we were really trying to do was to encourage some of our developers to make the jump back over to crawl spaces, looking at it and saying, look, if this is what they're trying to look, we could probably achieve the same thing for not much more money by doing a crawl space. And one of the problems that the task force was dealing with when we were talking about slab construction is what developers do when they go in and they mass grade the site to be able to use the slab construction. And so you lose the topography, you lose a lot of the trees, and you end up with these massive retaining walls that hold back the earth, and some of these practices that really in the end don't net a good looking community. And I think we need to think very long and hard as we go forward with talking about these slab construction communities, because it's not just 2 steps, it's not just 3 courses of brick, it's the mass grading that goes around it, it's the retaining walls, it's the denuding of all the trees. These practices that you didn't see occurring a lot in the 80s, early 90s, when a lot of people say, oh, Cary was developed in such a beautiful manner, and now we have communities going up, and our citizens are driving around going, how did the town approve this?
You don't happen to have, just because you brought up this is a model home, you don't happen to have one that
That's not a
has
model
two-step?
home.
That's comparable, by chance, in your arsenal of pictures?
No, I do have quite a selection. I'd be glad to bring various examples, to the public
That'd be
hearing
good.
that you can take a look at.
That'd be really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like snap at you, but it's just like, you see model homes, and when you take around people and they're looking at a model home, everybody always says, ooh, I love this model home, and then it's like another $30,000 to get the base home to look like the model home. It's just kind of,
But what I would add is
Not indicative.
if this is what you want, then council should consider asking for maybe more than 12 inches or more than 12 on the front, or if you like what you see and that's what you want to be the minimum, we can consider that.
so instead of going down, go up.
Sure. We could look at different heights on the front versus the side or the rear. There are lots of options, and we just felt that what we were seeing in the field had begun to shift enough from what we thought was the intent of the original ordinance. It merited some revisiting with you all, and we've gotten some some pushback from the development community. So we're trying to make sure that we're still true as far as what the council, what the community is looking for.
Okay, that's fair.
So I
Still the question.
just one more question, because I can't decide on the step part of it, just
Okay.
to make sure I understand. I spent a lot of time in Carolina Preserve, because I have family there, and I don't notice a difference between those homes that are, clearly they're in an age-restricted area, and any other homes that are lifted. So it's very difficult for me to make that consideration. But I will say, and I appreciate your point about aging in place, because that's what I'm doing. And it is difficult. I mean, just the 3 or 4 steps. Even when my parents were going to move in with me, we were going to have to find some way to allow my parents to be able to get in with my dad in a wheelchair. And there was no home at that time that we could find, no land that we could find that would allow us they weren't building on slab at that time, that would allow us to do that. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, because it is something that as I get older, I think about, boy, it would be great to plan for the inevitable, which it might be more difficult, to have a home without any steps. And I know I've had that discussion with other people that are getting older. So I am very curious of what the difference looks like. Is it a clear delineation between being just 2 steps up or not?
What I might suggest is you allow us to keep it in the amendment for now for discussion purposes, bring you a lot of pictures. There's always the option to delete it later. If you delete it now, you won't have the option to discuss it and receive feedback from the public.
That's a great idea. Would that be
good
all right
idea.
with the rest of council?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question from anyone? It could be you, Rob, or anyone at the table. What was the impetus for changing the LDO to allow for slab on grade construction? Because apparently that wasn't, at one point, that wasn't allowed in Cary.
Oh, I think it was probably allowed. It probably just wasn't a business practice that was heavily utilized.
And then,
Right, but when the Tree Preservation Task Force met, what year do you guys think that was? We'll call it, for fun, we'll call it 2005. I don't remember, it was a long time ago, maybe 2006. Okay. We addressed, it bled into the conversation about on-slab construction and what it looked like.
because of what was happening.
Because what was happening, everything around it.
Okay.
So that's where it kind of came, all the conversation started was out of the Tree Preservation Task Force.
I just think about folks who don't have to be in a wheelchair to still have mobility issues, where being able to walk into their home on a flat surface like this would be a great advantage. You've had a stroke and you're recovering and you're using a walker or a 4-point cane. You don't have to be totally disabled to find this attractive in terms of using it. So I like Rob's suggestion to keep this for discussion purposes and to bring us more pictures to look at, because as we keep talking about our demographics and how our population is aging, and anything that makes it easier to get in and out of your home, even if you're not disabled, is probably seen as advantageous. I don't want it to look bad, don't get me wrong, but I do think we have to think about
We have to be very careful, because what my perception is, it might be wrong, is that we set our ordinances with a goal to achieve a certain aesthetic standard, and we have some in the development community who find ways to get around
Take
that.
advantage of that, I hear you.
And we end up with bad-looking product. And I think our residents are starting to really question that, and they're starting to question why our newer development doesn't always
look as good as
our older product.
So I hear option 2 with pictures.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right.
Pictures.
Thank you,
A
Rob.
paragraph on the back of each one.
Thank you. Temporary uses.
Okay, the next item, item D, relates to temporary uses and events. Item D would allow institutional uses such as religious assembly to occupy other facilities such as schools 1 day per week, and signage would be allowed on that 1 day per week. Right now, we don't have any provisions to allow signage for when there's this temporary or intermittent type of use. The second item under this category would allow would address temporary signs for institutional uses, for example, when there are frequent activities that occur that are part of the nature of that use. Currently, a temporary use permit is required, but the number of temporary use permits you can get per year is limited, and some of the activities don't really rise to the level of a temporary use that requires a permit. So we propose to just have some provisions where temporary signage would be allowed for various activities for a cumulative total of 30 days per year. That would be per calendar year. We would propose to have that be pre-scheduled in some way for the year to give us some idea when those 30 days would be, and to provide some of those signage options. For this next item, I'll ask Russ Overton, our Assistant Town Manager, to speak to cluster mailboxes.
Thanks. Good evening, Council. Recently, the town received notification from the Postal Service that regulations and approvals regarding residential mail delivery had changed to more centralized delivery, including the use and preference of cluster box units, CBUs. Staff has been meeting with local Postal Service manager and working to expedite this issue and resolve this for citizens affected by the change. And I wanted to let you know that staff will present revisions to the town's standard specifications and detail manual, and will provide additional information about this new regulation to you on May 8th. This item will also continue to move forward in this round of LDO amendments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Mary and continue the presentation.
Any questions about CBUs? Okay.
Well, I mean,
Mr. Smith.
I can tell you that I just watched a very nice development go up in, of all places, Anger. And if you want to see something that was absolutely ruined, it's at the end when they had to put those cluster box units in. It is just, it's a sad state of affairs. It just looks like crap. And it's a nice place, you know.
What kind of community is it? Multifamily?
I didn't drive in, but, you know, I think it's more what I would call duplexes if I was living up north, okay. You know, the townhome type of thing. And now as you have this nice entrance, and as soon as you go in, you know, the road goes left and right, and there you got, right there, you know, it takes away from the whole entrance and everything. So I guess it's one of those things we're going to have to manage with, you know, our codes and our guidelines. But I don't know how much lipstick you can put on one of those things. I mean,
Well, I think they can be made to look good. I'll tell you, I had a cluster box unit up in my place in Alexandria, Virginia, when I used to live there. The problem with it is that you have to use a key to access your box, which means you're standing at your mailbox longer getting rained on. So I think we need to be considering not only the aesthetics, but the comfort of our citizens who are having to go out and check their mail with a key and, you know, getting into it, you know, sheltering it in some way would be a nice
Well,
standard.
as far as coming back on the 8th, we're trying to just settle the issues of
Okay.
folks that don't currently have mail service.
I see.
And,
Okay.
and
So it's just, okay, just the bare
I
minimum
got you.
here. Got it. Okay.
But we can, that's probably something that can be
Something we
looked
need to
at
look forward
later.
to in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
The next item includes several miscellaneous development standards, looking at reducing setbacks in the town center or the MDR, medium-density residential subdistrict of the town center, and also in the transitional residential districts, just to provide a little bit more flexibility within those higher intensity of the single-family districts. Also, a change that would allow the replacement of certain detached dwellings that have non-conforming setbacks, and also provide more parking options for model homes. And then finally, there are a number of amendments, minor amendments classified under technical minor. These are various changes related to procedures, terminology, and other items that are more of a cleanup item in nature. So with that, we recommend that council set a public hearing date of May 22nd for these amendment items. And for the items that we don't have the draft text provided, and then based on the input tonight, we will finalize that text to bring forward for the public hearing.
Is there a motion?
Move that we bring this set of proposed LDO amendments to public hearing on May 22nd, 2014.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries 6-1. Okay, thank you, Ms. Bierman. We've been at this 2 hours, 20 minutes. Keep going? Or do we need a break?
I'm fine. Keep going.
Keep
No.
going.
Yeah, I'll get up and leave when I need.
That takes us to item 6-4, the Town Code and Land Development Ordinance Text Amendment Round 29. Ms. Ridley will present this item, and then council may take action.
Good evening. For your consideration is a request to set a public hearing date for proposed amendments to the Town Code regarding the establishment of a Town of Cary Historic Preservation Commission. Currently, under an interlocal agreement, the Wake County Historic Preservation Commission and its staff administer the Cary Landmarks Program. The purpose of the code amendments being proposed is to establish a Cary Historic Preservation Commission, or HPC, with members appointed by council to take over the administration of Cary's landmark program from Wake County, and to establish a regulatory framework for a Cary HPC to regulate properties within local historic districts if local historic district zoning were ever adopted. In taking over the landmarks program from Wake County, the landmarking process would remain the same as it is now, except that potential landmarks would be recommended by a Cary HPC rather than a Wake County HPC. And if approved by council, landmarks would be regulated by a Cary HPC and Cary staff rather than the Wake County HPC and its staff. Historic Preservation Commissions are established under the authority of the North Carolina General Statutes. The powers, duties, and processes of an HPC include the regulation of local landmarks and local historic districts and are spelled out in the statutes. The amendments proposed by staff reflect the intent and, in some cases, the exact text of the state statutes. So here's just an overview of the proposed amendments. They will do the following: establish a Cary HPC, outline the HPC's powers and duties, outline procedures for administering the landmark program, including a penalty for unapproved demolition of locally landmarked properties, and outline a framework and process for regulating local historic districts in the future, should any be approved. And it's important to note that these proposed amendments don't create any new landmarks. That's a separate process that I think we've been through. And nor do they create any historic districts. So staff recommends setting a public hearing date of May 8th, 2014, for the consideration of the proposed code amendments, with the knowledge that the draft text may be added or modified based on feedback tonight and continued review by the legal department. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Yarha, let me start with you.
Oh, gee.
Well, I'll be brief because I fear that some of us are aging in place. As far as these ordinance amendments, I think it's fantastic. I think the staff report is one of the best staff reports I've seen in a long time. You're to be commended, Anna. It's a complex issue. We've learned how complex it is lately to form a new board or commission. This one is even more so because it has a lot of dependencies. And I think the way you've presented it here is a wonderful first step in doing so. And I think the phasing that you've indicated in your staff report is excellent. And if we can hold to the timing that you had in the staff report, that would even be better. It's wonderful. But before I would even make a motion or hear other discussion, I do want to make one mention about the Wake County Historic Preservation Commission. We are establishing our own commission not because we have any dissatisfaction whatsoever with the Wake County Commission. I want to make that clear. They have been wonderful partners with us for a long time, and I hope they continue to be a good partner with us as we go through this. Someone asked me just today, actually, whether we're the only renegade town here that's pulling out of the commission. Are we too good for the commission?
Oh, my goodness.
Thing. And the answer to that is that the Wake County Commission, Raleigh is not part of the Wake County Commission. They have their own framework. Wake Forest has their own framework. The county commission serves 9 towns. Of those 9 towns, we are not only the largest, but after we approve a few more rezonings, we're going to be about as large as the other 8 put together. We're just below that standpoint right now. So I think it's entirely appropriate that we stand alone. Plus our approved historic preservation master plan, which you all approved a few years ago, calls for this as one of its major points. And then not to mention, although I will, the fact that we've seen a lot of cases lately where this issue has come up. And I think we need to have a predictable way of dealing with it instead of doing it on the fly. So I think all those are reasons that we're doing this, not because we have a dissatisfaction with the Wake County Commission. Gary Roth especially has been just wonderful and continues to be a great resource for us. So to let more discussion take place, I'd be happy to make the motion. That
sure.
I recommend that we hold a public hearing on these amendments on May 8th.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a second discussion.
The only thing I wanted to point out is that as we move forward, the fiscal impact of this is 10% of a staff member's time. So I'm assuming that we're also in the budgeting time, that somehow that is pulled into some of the budget discussions. Because 10% isn't not an insignificant amount of time.
10% of one staff member's time? Okay.
You have to hire somebody's arm.
Make it the right arm.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I've had a request before we go to our next item that we take a very short break, and then 5 minutes, and we'll be right back.
We'll allow the little boys up there thanking me to have a break.
Oh.
We'll reconvene our council meeting. We're on item 6.5. It's the rezoning request for the Stitt property south. Staff's going to give a report, then we'll hear from our Planning and Zoning Board's recommendation, and council may take action this evening. Ms. Bierman.
This is a request to rezone about 48 acres on Green Hope School Road and Sears Farm Road. Properties on the south side of Green Hope School Road. It's about 1,500 feet west of NC 55 highway. This is a closer aerial view. To the east is Highcroft Village. West is the Highcroft and the Sears Farm Road Park, and to the south is the Reserve. There is a residence on the property, the Sears House, that is on the historic inventory. The existing zoning is R40. The proposed zoning is transitional residential conditional use. The proposed zoning conditions include limiting land uses to detached dwellings and neighborhood recreation with a maximum density of 3.6 units per acre. The minimum lot size would be 10,000 square feet adjacent to the reserve, except for the portion that's also adjacent to a stream buffer. Other proposed zoning conditions include several that were added or modified after the Town Council public hearing. Adjacent to the reserve, where you can see with the purple line here, is proposed a 40-foot buffer that would be in the common open space. 30 feet of that would be opaque, and then there would be an opaque fence. And then adjacent to that buffer for the residential lots that would be located there, there would be a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet with the 30-foot rear setback. And then also adjacent to the stream buffer, which you can see in the pink area, the minimum lot size for the lots adjacent in this area would be 7,000 square feet. Where there are no conditions related to minimum lot size, the 5,000 square feet allowed in the transitional residential district would apply. Also added since the public hearing is a 30-foot type B streetscape adjacent to Sears Farm Road. You can see that on the blue line. And then on the east side, adjacent to Highcroft Village, is a 50-foot buffer, 40 feet of which would be undisturbed, then 6-foot evergreens planted, 5 feet on center, and then a fence through that area to address concerns from the neighbors on that side of the property. Also, with the zoning conditions, there are traffic mitigations that were recommendations of the traffic study that was prepared, and that includes westbound left turn lanes on Green Hope School Road at Sears Farm Road and at the site access point on Green Hope School Road, and also the ingress-egress lane configurations at the access points as proposed by the traffic study. This shows the southwest area plan. The plan designation in this, on the side is a low-density to medium-density residential, with the lower portion for a distance of about 100 feet being called for as low-density and the remaining as medium. The staff's analysis with this indicates that we do find it to be consistent with the land use plan with regard to the minimum lot size, between the minimum lot size and the buffering and the overall densities that are proposed in the zoning conditions. There are some stream buffers shown on the site according to Cary's GIS maps. A field determination of this would be made at the time of the subdivision or site plan approval. This shows the Cary Parks and Greenways plan. There is a greenway connection that would be made to fill in a gap in the greenway between Highcroft Village and the reserve. According to the Cary's transportation plan, Green Hope School Road is a major thoroughfare. This shows the protest petitions. We did receive, I believe, about 16 or 21 perhaps protest petitions initially during the process. A number of those were removed. With the petitions that were removed, it is no longer valid. It's down to about 2.7% of the area. The concerns that were expressed in the protest petition included insufficient buffering, the density being too high, opposition to the road extension from Highcroft Village, and then there were 7 of the petitions that had no comments on them. At the public hearing, there were concerns expressed related to the buffers adjacent to Highcroft Village, the streetscape along Sears Farm Road, and the general transition from low to medium density residential adjacent to the reserve, and traffic safety along Edgemore Avenue, which is a road that goes through the reserve. These are the proposed zoning conditions that were added after the Town Council public hearing. The Planning and Zoning Board recommended approval by a vote to 7-1, and I'll call on Mr. Swanstrom to present the Planning Board recommendation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. As you've been told, we voted 7-1 to recommend approval of this plan. I'm going to start by giving you the reasons cited positive for approval. First of all, we were very impressed that the developer had worked quite arduously with the local residents and gotten a number of the protest petitions removed. We thought that they had shown great flexibility, the kind of thing that we really like to see in a collaborative kind of process. We did appreciate that the lower density adjacent to the reserve somewhat addressed the spirit of a transition. However, one of our members felt a concern that it could have been more, that the density could have been lower adjacent to the reserve. We had another general concern, and this is one that shows up all the time, and it is, school capacity and traffic. And in particular, the point was made, and made quite strenuously, that each one of these individual projects maybe doesn't represent a huge impact on schools or roads. But when you start taking a look at the number of projects cumulatively, the impact is very significant. Now, I don't know what you do about that. We don't control schools. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to even impact the schools within our ordinances. And roads, to the extent that we're improving when we get development, but it's still a concern. I don't have a good answer for you. We didn't come up with a good answer at our meeting, but it was a concern. And then the final concern was there is a historic structure on the property that there isn't, or at least that at that time there wasn't a plan for preservation, and there was a concern that we're losing another historic structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanstrom.
So this concludes staff's presentation. We're available for any questions.
Very good. Council members, questions, comments?
I'll open up the conversation. I've been receiving a lot of input from citizens, not just specifically about this project, but about development in general in Western Cary, and about the impact on our roads network, and of course the impact on the schools, and the lack of capacity that we have to accommodate the growing population out there. We don't have all of the infrastructure and services that we really need to be able to accommodate it. I sent an email to a representative for this applicant to let that representative know that I would not be supporting this project because of the lack of infrastructure that we have out there. We just need to get, in my opinion, we need to get a handle on what's going on. And for the public's knowledge, the mayor and I and Lori will be meeting with Bill Fletcher from the school board to start talking about this and open up the conversation about the problem that's in front of us. But nonetheless, I sent an email to the representative, and today I received a call from the applicant asking if we would consider tabling this project rather than voting it up and down. And I I suppose that he probably got a sense that I wasn't the only one that was going to vote against this, and he's asking for that table. So I don't know if it's worthwhile for us to entertain tabling it and giving the applicant an opportunity to look at the impact that his project is going to put on our community and see if there's anything substantial that he can do to change that and make it such that we would be more in favor of this, or if we want to just vote it up or down. But I'm okay tabling it for a while. I don't know how long he would want for a table, but I'm okay with that.
Okay. Other comments?
Yeah, I've also had conversations with the applicant's representatives on the general issue as you described it, and also I think let me just summarize a little bit concerning the historic house on the property, because I've talked with them about that also. It's the applicant recognizes the importance of that house, and actually the family that presently owns it realizes the sentimental value that that house has to them. The applicant's representative has proposed some creative ways of going about remembering the house, memorializing the house, repurposing part of the house, some really neat creative things. None of those things are appropriate for rezoning conditions, so we don't see any of that in front of us here today, and I won't belabor us all here by going through them. But they're kind of neat. And I still hold hope, based on recent conversations, that there is a way to really save the house intact somehow or another. And I firmly believe the applicant is going to try to work for that. But in front of us tonight is the rezoning, and there's none of that in here, nor can it be. So I did tell him, this was a week or two ago, that because of that, and to be consistent with the way I voted on other projects, that if we are voting tonight, yes or no, that I would not be able to support the project because of that. The historic master plan is part of our comprehensive plan. It doesn't comply with that, and the staff report even indicates that. So I told him that with all due respect. But I do hold hope that maybe something could be done, and perhaps tabling would give us time to do that. Talking about the major issue, if you will, because the house is obviously a minor issue when we're talking about school seats for hundreds of kids. To me, the growth out there is not as bad a problem as the timing of the growth right now. Everything's happening at once, and that's not good. I mean, we look at, as Mr. Swanstrom was saying, we look at rezoning by rezoning, and maybe each one complies with the land use plan, and we're okay. But the land use plan does not do a good job when it comes to timing, right? It loses that aspect of it. I looked at the email we get once a month, although I don't think we got one in April, about plans in process or whatever it's called. I looked at the March one. There are 53 plans in process listed on that report. 26 of those 53, exactly half minus one, are in District A. Now, they're not all residential. In fact, one is a school, so I think that's a good thing. But still, 26 of those 53 are in District A, and it doesn't mean it's all west of 55. It could be east of 55. I didn't get into that kind of detail. But there certainly is a lot going on out there that's more than normal. I wondered, if, looking at that report, whether the staff is able to come up with something, not necessarily for this rezoning, but to help us, because I know there's a lot more that we're going to see in recent weeks, with some kind of one-pager that maybe can isolate what's in the pipeline, number of units, at least to your knowledge, and maybe a timing element there. And I know there's a lot of guesswork involved in that, because you don't know if a builder's going to build next year or year and a half from now. But it's some kind of reference for us to really help us, because we're hearing numbers 700, 1,000 units, and I think all the numbers we're hearing from the residents out there are right, but they're using different parameters. And I'd like to really see some numbers if we're able to do that. If we can't, we can't. But some concise reference points so we know what we're dealing with. And maybe that will help. Maybe this applicant would, after seeing that, would care to phase his rezoning in a little bit. Might like to add some phasing conditions. I don't know if we allow it to be tabled. So I'd support, if we're voting yes or no, I told the applicant it's a no for me. But if we table it, there may be some advantage to that too, and I would support that.
Okay. Other, Mrs. Smith?
Yeah. I'm going to take it a little bit from a different perspective. I think it's time. Well, first of all, if we have a yes or no, and I haven't really talked to many of you about it, so I don't know where your personal opinions are, except what I'm hearing right now. But, you know, once in a while, I think we have to make a statement and address some of the concerns. And we've always been, if somebody comes back and addresses some of the concerns, and some of it might be natural just by waiting, but we've given, we've made exceptions for them to come back and reopen the case, you know. And so I think it's time to, you know, to stand up and be counted on the problems that are facing us. And if you look at it at a macro level, we're going to talk later about two concerns that are surfacing. All over town, we're getting the infill problems, and a lot of times the problems are associated with abuse. It's just, I don't know what it is about the nature of the beast right now, but there's almost a, I don't know if the word is arrogance, but there's an attitude of whatever we can squeeze out of it, we're going to get. And that's just not what Cary is all about. And I think if we believe that this is a concern, and part of it, you bring up a very good point, Ed, part of it is the volume. That was the problem we had in Deja Vu back in the 90s. You know, that growth here was just nonstop. You couldn't come up for air. And that was really it in a nutshell. And we had the exact same problems we have now. You know, everybody was talking about the schools, and then they were talking about the roads. And the fact of life is we can't, you know, we can address some of it and we can leverage some of it, but the nature of how things are done in North Carolina, we don't have a lot of control on that. So where do you go with that? So I think it's a good idea that you're meeting with Fletcher and you're letting that go. But we're having just a lot of things. We're having where the model for townhomes says that no children or very few children are in that model. The results are showing us different. They're showing that we are having kids. So we need a breather. We've got to slow down the pace of building. We've got to, and as we talked about earlier, we have to continue to hold to our standards. And you said it best about the plan. Every time something comes in, it's a request for more density to make the model work for the development community. So I'd rather just vote. And if the person has something they want to come back with that addresses some of those concerns, deal with it. You know, ask us for a request to, you know, not wait a year. But I'd rather vote for it. Vote on the topic.
Well, I'm just going to kind of echo, kind of play off Mr. Smith here and say, you know, the proposed zoning, a good deal is made of the fact that the proposed zoning is compliant with the land use plan. Well, so's the current zoning. There's nothing wrong with the current zoning, and the proposed zoning is 3 times more dense than what this land is zoned for. And while we have no control over the number of schools built and the number of seats available, we do have some control over the number of potential students who can go to those seats. And I think we have to exercise what control we have. I think we can mitigate the impact on the schools, we can mitigate the impact on the roads and the intersections, and the only way we do that is by doing what we can control, which is the amount of density we allow. So unless this were to get tabled and come back with a substantial difference, I'm going to vote against it anyway, and so I don't want to prolong anybody's agony. And I think Mr. Smith is right. We can always do a waiver of the one-year waiting period. If the plan comes back substantively different than it came to us, it has to be a real substantive. So I just feel like it's only fair to say that, so the applicant and the owners of the land can hear that. But I appreciate, Jennifer, you're offering the, you know, the opportunity for the applicant to change this, but I don't know that it can change enough to get my support.
Mr. France.
I don't know that it can change enough to get the majority of council's support, but I would really love to give the applicant the opportunity to try.
Yeah, there's,
I think he's really made some major progress in addressing a lot of the community concerns already in regards to buffering and lot sizes up against adjacent communities. And anytime you can get, I forget the number, but 20 whatever protest petitions removed, I mean, that's pretty impressive. So I would really like to give him the opportunity to try to see what other, magic they can possibly work on the site. We're all concerned about the schools issue, and yes, we technically have no control over that. We constantly hear that, well, there's no money for the schools, there's no money for the schools, we need another bond referendum, yada, yada, yada. I can't help but think that it maybe if we weren't building Taj Mahals for schools, that we might be able to get a few more of them. I would ask everybody on your free time to Google an image of Rollsville High School. It's one of the most recent high schools built, if not the most recent high school built by Wake County. And tell me if that looks like your typical high school. I have no idea what it cost, but it looks like in a university quality museum. It is phenomenal. I'm not saying we need to go back to, cinder block, one-story type things, but
Does it have 2 steps, or does it?
is it slab on grade?
yeah, there's no margin on it whatsoever. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility, but I just can't help but wonder what that actually cost. And if at the end of the day the goal is educating the kids, then I don't know that they need to sit in a Taj Mahal to do it. Quite frankly, the school buildings we had in the 50s, 60s, and 70s weren't all that fancy, and the results were a heck of a lot better. So I would applaud the applicant for all their efforts thus far. I would hope that they hear and can address some of the council's concerns. Part of me really, I would not want to just vote this down. I mean, we hear a lot about, the concerns over high density and the apartments and the amount of townhomes and such. Here we do have a quality single-family detached community that's proposed. I would hate to just throw that away. I would like to just give it the opportunity to see if they can work a little magic on it.
For the record, we're not voting on the developer. We're just voting on the densities and the conditions that are offered. So it's not, we don't know if it's
the quality.
quality. We don't know the quality because we just know the densities.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah.
It might have parging on the sides of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Terrible.
It's our new word of the day.
No.
Yeah, we actually did it years ago. I have no idea what it was called.
Yeah.
They told me what they were going to do, and they did it, and it looked cool, so.
Well, can I ask a quick question, kind of piggybacking off of what you said? Because this applicant has entered into a private developer agreement with the adjacent homeowners, and that was one of the pivotal reasons why so many homeowners removed their protest petition. But if this applicant were to rezone this land and then choose not to develop it, does that developer agreement in any way stay with the land? Or that's only if this developer chose to develop it?
I would have to refer to legal counsel on
That's a
that. If
good
the
question. I
agreement
bet
is
it-
made between the developer and the individual
It's a private
property
agreement, I bet it
owners.
goes away.
private.
Yeah, we haven't seen the agreement, and I don't know how it's.
But in theory.
But in theory.
Where
Would
does
a-
that agreement
would
go?
a-
It could be done many ways. Frequently, it is something that runs with the land and
It does.
binds development. but
Could.
It could.
I would
Okay.
think that it would be contingent upon the development commencing and going forward, and
That in
How about we just
itself-
ask for some more information, so if this comes back, that question's answered?
Yeah, I would need that
but
question.
that's
the
really
residents
not
will care.
pertinent to your decision in a rezoning either.
Yeah.
Because we have no
Right.
control over it.
Although I wonder if they.
So we have to assume there is no developer agreement. We have to assume that everything the developer has said to the residents, the nearby adjacent residents, is not a factor in our decision, and it is only what, regardless of who the developer is, the density and the conditions that we see before us. And it could be custom, it could be Pulte, it could be MI, it could be Ashenwoods, we don't know. It's just the density and the conditions that are offered before us.
It's in front of you, yes.
That's important for us to understand.
Ms. Bush?
Well, growth has been an issue in Cary for many years, right? I think all of us at one point, when we were either running for office, well, maybe not Jack, But when we were running for office, we talked about growth, and people talked to us about their concerns about growth. And, in the past, before the recession, is what stopped people talking about growth being a problem. And the town was able to catch up during that time on infrastructure. Unfortunately, the school system didn't catch up at that same time. But now the economic revival has brought development back to Cary. And, honestly, we know it's a great place to live. The developers know it's a great place to live. And the people who are already here know it's a great place to live. So I feel that, we have a commitment that we made to the residents that are already here, as well as a commitment to new potential citizens to do what's right. And I think the citizen who spoke up about traffic concerns, it is getting worse. And this cumulative effect, we haven't really considered at the council table. We've only made decisions on these individual parcels, and now it's coming to us where we've hit the tipping point. And I would have to say, I'd be in, if we were to vote at the table now, I would be in the no camp as well.
Do you think that tabling it would have any productive result? Do you think that would you be inclined to table, or would you be inclined to do what Jack said, and which is to deny, and they can come back, and if it's substantially vote, and it may be denied, and if denied, if it's substantially different, then they ask for a waiver?
What is the potential risk? I mean, what is the extra work effort for the applicant to come back and ask for a waiver? I just want, what is the difference between tabling it and denying?
They'd have to resubmit to the waiver?
Well, if it's tabled, then it would need to be tabled at the minimum for 2 council meetings, just to have time to prepare another staff report to send out, and also probably for a longer period realistically, in order for the applicant to have the time to work through whatever changes were made, to provide additional zoning conditions or whatever changes to staff. So I would have to defer to the applicant to see how much time
I think the question was on the waiver more than anything. So if we voted on it and it was denied, usually there's a 1-year waiting period, and there's a waiver process.
There's a waiver process for that. That process would just be bringing an item at a regular meeting back to your board. You could, there's just a simple letter that's sent for that. We would provide the rationale from the applicant, and then you could take a vote on that. And if that was approved, then they would resubmit as a new public hearing item and start all over.
But if it is, I'm going to do the process thing, but if it is significantly different, I know there's a couple people at this council table that would want to see it go back through P&Z.
Right, because that's where it should go.
So wouldn't it, if it were denied and received a waiver, wouldn't they would then come back through the entire process again through P&Z?
They would go back to P&Z. There would be a public hearing at P&Z. If it started over completely, then before it got to P&Z, there would be a public hearing before Town Council, and it would be a new submittal, the new fees. It would get into a submittal cycle, so the time frame would be lengthened in that case. Although you would, because you would have to resubmit and then start over with another public hearing at Town Council before going to P&Z, as opposed to just coming before you for a meeting.
Other than, kind of dragging this out to potentially still ultimately deny it, I just don't see the harm in tabling it. If you wanted something, I guess I'm struggling with the P&Z part of it, because they voted 7-1 in favor of what's before us. Anything that comes back, while it might not be enough, is going to be less intense, or there's going to be some positive changes made to it. Do we really need it to go back to P&Z to get another affirmative vote? So
I think we'd have to see it to know, but it's a fair question to ask, and I'm okay with more time. I'm just saying it would have to change.
Understood. And I think the applicant hears everybody loud and clear too. So I guess I'm just struggling with how long to table, 2 months, 3 months, what?
Well, she said at least 2 meeting cycles.
At least 2 meetings if it's tabled, and then it would be,
So
I
that's
mean,
a
it would
month.
be up to you if they came back with changes, if you wanted to send that back to P&Z or not send it back, that would be your choice.
And the entire process, if they start over, that's 4 or 5 months.
The entire process, if they start over, minimum of about 5 months.
Yeah.
After
And if
the
it's
submittal.
tabled and then has to go back to P&Z, maybe 2 or 3, well, more than 2, because it's 2 council meetings. but-
Why would it have to go back to P&Z?
She's saying if.
If it went back,
I'm
then
just
it
trying
would
to-
add,
worst case scenario.
basically add another month or possibly 2 months to the process that they're in, as opposed to starting anew.
Okay, that helps a lot.
So the question before council is whether or not to table. And
We haven't had a motion yet, have
I
we?
know,
No,
that's,
he's saying the question, but not the motion.
right,
Yeah.
not a motion, but
It's
that's a
called the
question.
The issue we're discussing.
The issue, there you go, thank you very much. So I would entertain.
I'll make a motion to table this.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to table discussion.
I'm going to support the motion to table, but please don't make this seem like there's still a very strong possibility it's going to be a no when all's said and done, especially concerning the House situation. But I certainly would like to see more time in I think it's a less onerous way to go about it than denying and going through the whole process again. So I'm going to support your motion, Tom.
May I just say that I think, Don, I think your point about the P&Z is appropriate and accurate. However, if they make substantial changes, it seems like we ought to let citizens weigh in on that and hear from them whether they think that this makes a difference or not. So-
Especially given what we heard tonight at Public Speaks Out. And also, I think it honors the planning and zoning process where a group of citizens deliberate. I understand it may be less intense, but it's still not the same plan they voted on. So what comes to us, it was not what was approved 7-1. It will not be, it will be something they did not see. And I'm going to support the motion because I'm always in favor of giving people more time to work things out. It seems like the fair thing to do. But with Mr. Urha, don't take that as an ultimate yes. It depends on what it looks like when it comes back.
That's right.
Fair enough.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, I don't see the advantage. I think we have an opportunity here to call it a shot across the bow. I don't think we're really harming the applicant in the sense that the time when they come back is not really significantly different than if we give them a waiver. And I think we have a real opportunity here. We're sending one message that we're trying to be fair and tolerant and delay. So be it. That's a fair thing to consider. At the same time, I think sending a message about the volume and pace of things going on out there, I think we would send a message if we deny.
Any other comments or questions? I'd ask for a show of hands for the motion. All in favor of this motion to table, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Those that oppose, motion carries 5-2. Thank you, Ms. Bierman. So since we have moved the tabling, do we need a motion to table the consistency statement?
Or does that travel?
Okay. We removed item 6.7 from the agenda, and that takes us to our next item, 6.8. It's the discussion item on the AT&T Master Network Development Agreement. Mr. Stice will present this item, and council may take action. Mr. Stice.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Most of you are aware that for about 2 years, we've been working on what was formerly called the Gig-U project, trying to recruit private company to come in and build one or more to build, own, and operate a high-speed fiber network up to a gigabit in speed. Just to give you an order of magnitude definition of how gigabit relates, if you were to take a 2-hour movie and download it, an average 2-hour movie, it would take about 25 seconds to download a 2-hour movie over connection that fast. So that's a pretty fast connection. It has the potential for a lot of things. One of the things that this is unique is that 6 municipalities and 4 universities got together to form a group called the North Carolina Next Generation Networks. and Cary was one of those back in 2012. In 2013, we sent out an RFP. We had 8 respondents, and of those 8, one tonight, AT&T, has come to an agreement with us. We've been negotiating for a little over a year. We've gotten to the point where AT&T is ready to sign a master agreement. That master agreement provides several things for the communities, services in the markets and in the municipal area. Some of these services include community broadband internet access service for public sites. It also includes public Wi-Fi hotspots, broadband service to multiple dwelling units, and some small and medium business programs. So there's some things that we are getting out of it. What AT&T is asking for is that we assign a single point of contact for the project, that we assign inspectors for it, that we facilitate as much as possible a quick turnaround on the permitting process and the review process, and that we also grant to them no less favorable terms than we would to anybody else for that way. So there's a non-discriminatory clause as part of the agreement. All 6 municipalities are signing essentially the same agreement. The one exception is that Cary has its own privacy or non-discriminatory clause in it, but everything else is essentially the same. I believe right now 3 communities have approved it already, so we will be number 4 of the 6. I believe Raleigh, I know Durham has approved, and Winston-Salem has approved so far. So we're working on that. The agreement, after it's executed, town staff will continue to work with AT&T through the normal construction process that we would do as any network provider were to come in and construct in the town of Cary. They would be required to meet our encroachment and right-of-way agreements and so forth, and we would actually oversee that. The NC Engine Committee would continue to work with AT&T to determine how to equitably divide the community assets that they're going to provide to the community. They've said up to, for instance, 100. Think about that. I got to think which my number is here. Lost my train of thought. They've said they will provide up to 100 geographically distributed community broadband connections. That means to public meeting places. It could be community centers, it could mean boys clubs, girls clubs, or so forth. So those 100 connections will be provided among the 6 communities. NC Engine would work to develop an equitable way that those would be divided among the 6 communities. All of those things then would be mutually agreed upon. They would come back to council with the process and keep you informed as we go forward. So as far as the fiscal impact, while the master agreement commits the town to several items based on preliminary discussions, staff believes that there's no impact that can't be absorbed by existing resources. So staff recommends that council approve the master development agreement with AT&T and authorize the town manager to sign the master network agreement in substantially the form as attached on behalf of the town.
Mr. Stice?
Yes.
What's the downside?
That's the same question.
You know, I've been asked that question by the press and several other people, and I really don't have one. The town of Cary would provide these services, and we are in the business of being equitable, treating folks equitably anyway. So if any other carrier were to come in and ask to build, we would treat them the same way, whether it's Google or anybody else. And of course, that may be a possibility in the future. So we would do the same thing. So in my opinion, we have a lot to gain, but not a lot to lose.
Okay.
Follow up. So I appreciate that. You got right to the elephant in the room, but here's my question. So you talked about the non-discrimination clause. Why just Cary? Why aren't the other 5 communities and universities have this clause? And did we initiate it, or did AT&T?
They do have it. Ours is slightly different.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said we were the only ones.
Let Chris address that.
Okay.
It's not the non-discrimination clause that's different. We have confidentiality provisions that are different.
All right. That's okay then. I was just
Thank
going,
you, Chris,
why?
for correcting
It's a
that.
good thing. It sounds like a good business practice. But I was curious as why we were the only ones who were being good neighbors.
No, that's a constant in all of the jurisdictions.
That answered my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
Just one question that I had. With respect to the public Wi-Fi spots that are within the agreement, today, as a municipality, we're not allowed to offer public free Wi-Fi. How is this different that that we're able to do that is because of the agreement with AT&T, or?
Because AT&T will be providing the service for us. They will actually be providing the service to the public.
So if they decide not to, because there's a clause within there that they may decide not to do it, does that mean that we can?
I don't believe so.
Still,
Chris could
we're
speak to that
prohibited.
under the level playing field legislation, but I don't
Because they
believe
may
it would allow
decide not to deploy a public Wi-Fi, even though there's a clause that allows them not to
Right.
opt out of that.
Right. That does not empower us to do it. No,
Oh.
we don't
No.
get any.
No,
They would still own
no
the
get out of jail
infrastructure
free
and
card?
everything.
Or another provider could come in and provide the same service.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we've agreed that we would make the same kind of agreement available to anyone else.
And I think one last thing that's good is that they have a small to medium business program. And I do remember, I think it was you, Councilmember Bush, who almost 3 years ago talked to me privately about the fact that we have a real connectivity and bandwidth problem with small businesses.
We do.
And they would provide this at a reasonable cost. The real issue is the bandwidth at a reasonable cost. Right now, you can get high-speed bandwidth, but it costs a lot. This is a reasonable cost, very similar to, we expect that the cost will be very comparable to where the costs are in Austin, Texas, where both AT&T and Google have already announced, also comparable to Kansas City, Kansas, where Google has announced, and others. So we think those prices are probably going to be pretty comparable, which are hugely different than what we have available today.
Oh, I was glad to see that. I was glad to see that, and I was also really thrilled to see that there was a line item for affordable housing within the RFP and responded to, because that's a real problem for folks who are already watching every dollar to be able to afford that. So
That's correct. I
it's
believe
great.
they're going to connect 10, up
10
to
housing
10
complexes.
at 3 megabit for free for 7 years.
For free,
So
yep.
that's a pretty good deal.
Reminiscent of another fiber provider that we've heard, yeah.
Comments or questions? Others? Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the AT&T, or is it the master agreement?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Stice. We now move to item 6.9. Mr. Yerha, we want to hear from you about the existing connectivity ordinance policy.
Thank you, Mayor. We've seen lately a number of connectivity issues come before us, and I was hoping by maybe tweaking our ordinance or our policy a little bit, we might be able to ease some of those concerns. The concerns especially troubling are the ones where you have new development coming next to an established neighborhood, and we're seeing a lot of that lately. As Cary gets built out, we're abutting established neighborhoods. I mean, it's simple as that. So you would expect to see these concerns. But I would like to alleviate those where the established neighborhood, the neighbors, don't want to be connected. The applicant for the new development says, well, we don't want to connect either. It's the town who's making us do that. And then it comes before us, and many or a lot of us sit here and go, well, we really don't want that either. So I'm thinking there's a way we can improve somehow rather than go through that whole process. Possibly improve, as the items on the agenda say here, a little greater flexibility in the formulas that we use, and especially in the process that we use. Because right now, you don't address connectivity issues at rezonings. You got to wait for the site plan, so that you keep the residents waiting months and maybe years for that site plan to come along. And then, if perhaps a waiver is requested, you still got to wait longer for a quasi-judicial hearing, and that's tedious and expensive. I'm just thinking there's got to be an easier way to go about. I don't know what that easier way is within the bounds of the law, the way we're able to do things. But I'd like the staff to take a look at it and see if we can ease some of those concerns we're seeing. I know Mr. Smith may have some comments also.
Very well said. Anything to add, Mr. Smith?
No, he said it well. I mean, I think the other thing is, the whole reason for it is to disperse traffic and for safety. That's the crux of it. And what might come out of this is more detail around some workaround solutions, that, like when I was in Mobile, there were situations like this, and they created, I forget what they call them, chicanes or something, and they were the things that where in a real they provided a soft way of keeping the connectivity from happening, but it allowed the emergency vehicles to get through. They just drive over the stuff, you know. And now the problem in Mobile was everybody started buying SUVs and we're driving over it anyhow. But so I'm not sure what that's the answer. But I just think we're going to see more of this, and everything else I'd just be reiterating what Ed said. I think it's just time to take a fresh look at it.
Okay. Other questions, comments, motion?
Make a motion.
Well, I propose that we direct the staff to review the existing connectivity ordinance and policies.
And I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion?
I guess
Oh, I'm sorry.
my only question is, staff clear what, I guess, what we're asking them to do and the how come, why fors?
I'm seeing nods, yes.
Okay.
There's at least one head.
It's all on Ricky.
It's all right.
Ricky.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We now move to item 610. It's a request that was added at the beginning of our meeting. Ms. Bush, we'll hear from you about this item pertaining to the town's buffer protection program and policy.
Well, thank you, and this is very similar to the conversation that Councilmember Urquhart started by talking about the fact that as we have more infill and as time has gone on, things have changed. What I think is happening now, we just recently had an episode where a large tree buffer has come down at Amberwood. That entire tree buffer was annihilated. And from my recollection, in the last 5 years, I think it's the third such activity, maybe more. We had one at Lowe's and several others. And another indication that potentially something needs to be done to stop this type of thing from happening and us always having to react to it rather than to have some method of being proactive before all the trees are gone. You know, one of the things that we've heard from our citizens, and Councilmember Smith can also speak to this, is that there's a lot of finger pointing after the fact. And we have such an innovative town staff who have come up with all kinds of ways to talk about enforcement. I'm wondering if we can have a discussion at the council table and potentially direct staff to look at what types of things could be done to highlight this problem, to more thoroughly protect our buffer protection areas so that we don't have the kinds of things that have happened in the past couple of weeks and years. Mr. Smith, would you?
Mr. Smith?
This is in your district, so.
Yeah, here's the irony. When we talked, we were talking about, again, in regards a lot to the infill that's happening and everything else. But in the past 3 weeks, I've witnessed, next to mass grading up north, I've witnessed the most egregious and outrageous violation of buffers. I want everybody and I want every citizen to go look at the back entrance of Lockmere, which 25 years ago, we created an opaque buffer as part of an agreement to that land, and it has lasted and has been a perfect entrance into town with visibility. And on one weekend, massive equipment came in, destroyed champion trees, totally denuded the bush, and then ground the stumps 12 inches down so you couldn't take an inventory of where the damage is done. In violation of town codes, in violation of homeowners' covenants codes, and in violation of just decency. It is outrageous. And so I think as part of this look, we've got to get past this wink, wink, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. And I really think that we've got to have, you know, we pride ourselves in being collaborative when mistakes happen. And I think that's good. Mistakes do happen. But there has to be, I think, more meat and some more teeth in the ordinance when it is a flagrant violation where the new owners have said, I'm not going to say it because it's secondhand information, so, But I can tell you that the homeowners association has met. I know we have met, and there's not a sense of remorse for what happened. And even after we met in a follow-up weekend, more equipment came in after being talked about the problem, and totally denuded all the brush and cut all the limbs down 40 feet up, so that you now have these signature trees with a tuft of limbs above the apartment complex. If that's the future of the kind of people that are going to invest in Cary, I want them to feel the wrath of Cary citizens in the town of Cary. That is not how we operate in this town. And all I can tell you is go look at it. And this is not what represents Cary, and we owe it to our citizens to not let this kind of stuff continue. And as part of that, I'm sorry to ramble, but it's as bad in my mind as the clearings in the north. And so it's time, because we're doing all these infills, that we send a message loud and clear that buffers are something that is of high value to us in Cary. Yeah.
Good.
I just look for your support on that.
Other comments?
I'm just asking the question, do we not have anything in the ordinance that penalizes them?
No, there's fines and there's remediation. There is.
To replant the buffer, or, Ricky?
Yeah,
you can answer that.
If you want more detail, I can provide it to you. If people go in and disturb a buffer, take trees out, there is both revegetation and fines that are required. And those are depending on the area disturbed. And that would be ranged from $2 to $4 a square foot of area disturbed. So we go out and calculate the area they've damaged the trees with equipment, or they've taken trees out, and then we take that square footage and times it by either $2 or $4, depending on I guess the whether or not it was just an obvious mistake, or if it was something that seemed like they should have known better. So that's kind of where we are right now. But if council wants for us to come back and explore higher penalties, we can do that as well, or any other ways to protect existing trees that are on older sites. We can look at that as well.
I would definitely support a significant increased fee structure, or fine structure, excuse me, along with whatever penalties you guys can come up with on this, because I agree with Mr. Smith, this is not tolerable. We have these rules and regulations in place for a reason, and if folks are violating them, I think like you said earlier, Mr. Smith, we're going to send a message. So,
and you know, to answer your question, this is my opinion, I think it's one of those costs of doing business, things that people, you know, get caught up in the culture. Well, you know, so we'll pay the fine.
yeah, well, if you wipe out 1,000 square feet of trees, it's a $400 fine.
Yeah, so you know,
You know?
we've got to fix that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I totally agree with both of you. The question that I would ask, and I think it's a legal one, is I'm pretty sure you can't put in ordinances that are just ridiculous with the fines, and so there's some limitation, right?
Yeah, I think the Constitution would require that it be rationally related to the harm, but we can certainly look at that.
Okay.
And we're permitted to change our fee structure after an event?
Yeah, it probably wouldn't apply.
Probably wouldn't apply to this one.
It won't apply to this one, but it will apply to anybody else who thinks of doing this kind of ridiculous thing.
But I think to most folks in Cary, the value of a mature tree is darn near priceless. And I would like to see a fine structure that at least reflects that sentiment.
And I would also add, I think any evaluation of intent should be out of there, whether they intended or not. I mean, how can we know anyone's intent?
No,
That's a totally subjective thing. It
understand.
happens or it didn't happen, and they ought to be penalized for it.
Right, so the original motion was asking staff to review and identify options for increasing the visibility and the protection of buffers, reviewing buffer protection enforcement options and potential fines, and bringing that back to council.
Yeah, and one of the,
Okay.
well, just one of the clarifications is that what Jack described about the limbing up, the excessive pruning, there's not an immediate fine for that. And so there used to be, there was decision that we needed to educate people first before you immediately fine them. So we can explore that again, and if you want to.
Yeah, I just think that no rational person would have ever suspected that you would take a champion tree, a full mature champion tree, and denude the limbs all the way up so that it looks like a palm tree.
Why would they do this? I think it would be harder to rent apartments that are overlooking a road versus overlooking a tree.
I can't answer.
We don't know.
It's speculation on my
They never
part.
explain themselves. Okay, I was just curious. It's stupid.
So, Mr. Barker, are you clear the direction?
Well, it's my understanding that you want to increase the fines and explore that possibility as it relates to the legal limits, and also just explore potential on these older sites, if there's any other things that we're missing about how to make sure those existing trees on sites are saved and or preserved.
Yeah, and this is probably not practical, and I know that, but to make the point, the things that are conditions that are part of a sale, I guess the question is, maybe it's for my education. My understanding is those are, just like when you convey a deed when you're selling your place and any conditions that are there. My understanding with Amberwood, back when it happened, it was a compromise with that neighborhood, and there were a lot of special conditions placed on that buffer. So, I guess I just need to understand that those conditions are in the bill of sale, that when people see that. I don't think there's anything we can do there, but if you have any creative ideas,
Well, I think we do often get, before people purchase property, we get opportunities to, because they request a zoning certification letter of what the zoning is on the property. And so we might want to explore including something about the buffers and things as it relates to that, so that the new owner knows that they have to preserve those tree areas.
And that speaks to what Ms. Bush was talking about, being proactive versus reactive.
Sure.
I think that would help go a long way toward that.
Right, I don't know if it's something like that, something consistent in the zoning letter, if it's a sign, this is a tree protection area, I don't know what that looks like, but especially with the champion trees, there's no way that we can get that back, even if they do replant them.
Oh, yeah.
And to be clear, as I said when first started, this didn't even happen when we talked about proposing this to all of you. So this is like
That happened since.
This just happened the last 3 weeks.
It got worse.
Yeah.
They started to take it down, and then it got worse.
But it was a great example.
How long? Like the first action and then a week later?
Yeah, it's been a week since we spoke, right?
So we have a motion by Ms. Bush, Mr. Smith second. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you.
Now move to item 611. Ms. Bush pulled the Walnut Street pedestrian and traffic improvements, accessibility pedestrian signals. And Ms. Bush, I'll open it up to you for your comments.
Okay, well, first off, I would like to thank staff for the detailed report. I learned a lot about the state-of-the-art of pedestrian signal technology, but actually I'd like to thank council, because I wasn't able to be at the meeting when this first came before council, so I appreciate you making a motion so that I could speak to it tonight. So first off, I agree with staff's suggestion that adding these types of additional pedestrian safety should, I think your final suggestion was that it should be decided upon on a case-by-case basis. And I absolutely agree with that. This is not cheap technology. Although, here's the concern I have about this particular intersection. It's in a commercial district. There's lots of shopping. It's a destination for many people. there's shopping, restaurants, there's homes that aren't too far away, there's apartments that aren't too far away, there's a C-Tran stop right there. So it is a pedestrian-friendly location. We just invested with Wake County and the state a lot of money to improve the intersection and the streets and the sidewalks to make it even more pedestrian-friendly. So we're trying to make this safe for pedestrians, and pedestrians who might not normally come to this intersection anyway are going to be coming here with all the improvements. So my suggestion is that we do it right, make sure that it, of course, that it makes sense. The additional cost is already identified in the budget and can be accommodated within the budget. And I think it would be a good place to start trying out some of these accessible methodologies to see if we can get more people, more persons with disabilities to feel safe and comfortable coming to this commercial district. So that's my thoughts about this intersection.
Okay.
And I support Ms. Bush in this. I think when you make a street better, make a roadway better such that it invites people to participate as pedestrians, then you should do everything you can to make it as safe for them as possible. And because this can be accommodated in the budget and not cost us more money, I see no reason not to make this our first one of these. And I do agree with staff that each intersection should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and that's what we asked for when this came before us before. And so I support that, Ms. Bush, and when you make that motion, I will.
So I'll make that motion that we approve the Walnut Street pedestrian traffic improvements, adding accessible pedestrian signals.
Second.
Discussion.
I guess the question would be, why did staff recommend leaving it out?
I think we can agree that when we try to do these improvements, we try to provide as much as we can. And I think the intent of the recommendation was that we're not opposed to providing them at locations such as this. This would be a good place for it. The recommendation would be to do that at places where we have a request from a visually impaired pedestrian. As we described in the staff report, the current equipment that we use provides a lot of accommodations and benefits for elderly pedestrians, which I think was kind of the impetus for this, as far as providing increased walking time for them to get across. The displays are brighter and they're larger and they provide a countdown. So a lot of these features are provided for a range of pedestrians so it can accommodate them. The auditory features that were asked for us to bring information back are specifically designed for visually impaired. So I think the recommendation was more for if we have specific requests at specific locations for these devices, it's something that we would consider. And these locations on Walnut Street would be ones that we would consider. We'd have to follow whatever process we are using for considering those for these locations.
Well, I'm not visually impaired, but I'm making the request. I just think it makes sense, and I think if we wait to do it and then try to retrofit it, because then the people come forward and say, guess what? I can't use the street safely. I think that's short-sighted.
Okay, other questions?
Just so I know what I'm probably getting ready to vote for, how much of a cost difference is this?
Sorry.
10,000, which was already allotted for within the budget. The budget can consume it.
2 or 3,000.
Okay, other questions? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mrs. Spencer. We do not have a closed session this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.